Hello everyone and welcome back to the Night Scared. Now I know a lot of you use these videos to sleep, so before you drift off, I thought it would be a fun idea if everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world. Also like and subscribe if you are enjoying the case. Right, let's get comfy and relax and let's begin. Story 1 on September 11th, 2003, the full moon of the Mid-Autumn Festival illuminated family reunions, and the festive atmosphere was everywhere. Families gathered around the table sharing stories and joy. However, outside the emergency room of a hospital in Suzhou, Jiangsu Province, China, a man named Chio Exa Chong sat in the waiting area, his face filled with sorrow. Inside the emergency room was his beloved wife, Gusu. Upon hearing that his daughter was in critical condition, Chio Xia Chong's father-in-law, Gurong, rushed to the hospital. He didn't have time to grieve. Instead, he immediately contacted an old friend who was the director of a hospital in Suzhou to assist in the emergency treatment. Unfortunately, despite the doctor's efforts over 2 hours, they were unable to save Go before retiring. Gurong had been one of the leading medical experts in the region. He had spent his life saving countless patients, but now he was powerless to save his own daughter. At that moment, the pain in the father's heart was overwhelming. As for the son-in-law, Cho Xia Chong, his grief was unbearable. He collapsed beside his wife's body, crying bitterly, and even attempted to bang his head against the wall to take his own life. This deeply moved everyone present as they could feel the profound love between the couple. Not only that Chio Exa Chong fell to his knees crying as he spoke to his in-laws, "You entrusted Su Su to me, but I failed to take good care of her. I'm so sorry. From now on, I will be your son by blood." Seeing the immense grief in their son-in-law, Mr. also felt deep sorrow, however. With his many years of experience in medicine and his knowledge of cardiology, he couldn't shake the suspicion that there was something unusual about his daughter's death. Gusu had always been healthy. Growing up, it was only in the past 2 years that she began experiencing dizziness, chest pain, and gradually developing symptoms of cardiovascular disease. Despite frequent medical checkups, the cause of her condition remained undiagnosed when Mr. Gu arrived at the hospital. He observed that his DA's pupils were dilated, her entire body was blue from head to toe, her abdomen was swollen, and there was fluid at the corners of her mouth. He also learned that her cause of death was listed as respiratory failure, with her heart stopping afterward. All these signs suggested that Gusu didn't die from heart disease as the hospital had concluded, but rather exhibited symptoms more consistent with poisoning. Because of this, Mr. Gu quietly preserved the fluids from his daughter's body to investigate further around 3 a.m. On September 12th, filled with suspicion, Mr. Gu privately called Chu Xia Chong, who was sitting beside his wife's body. Outside for a talk, he said to his son-in-law, "We are both doctors from the time you had dinner until Su Su was brought to the hospital. It was just the two of you at home. You need to tell me exactly how Su Su died." Faced with his father-in-law's questioning, Chu Xia Chong became highly agitated. He raised his hand to the sky and swore, "I absolutely did nothing wrong to Gu." Seeing his son-in-law's firm stance, Mr. Gu didn't press further, however, to clarify the cause of his daughter's death. He proactively suggested conducting an autopsy. This decision was met with general agreement from most people, but when Chu Xia Chong heard this, he immediately collapsed to the ground. His eyes filled with an inexplicable fear on the afternoon of September 13th of 2003, as forensic doctors were preparing to perform the autopsy. Chu Xiao Chong suddenly burst in. He knelt before the doctors, desperately trying to stop them from performing the autopsy on his wife. At that moment, it took about 7 or 8 men, but they still couldn't pull him away. He even pointed directly at his father-in-law and said, "She's already dead. How can you bear to cut open your own daughter?" Some relatives present tried to reason with him, saying that the autopsy might actually be in his best interest, as it could be necessary to clarify things later. But unexpectedly, these words only made Chu Xiao Chong even more furious. In this situation, the autopsy was delayed until 6 p.m. Before it could finally proceed, the results came out quickly on September 14th, 2003, when the Goof family received the autopsy report for their daughter. Ketamine is a short-acting anesthetic that is colorless, odorless, and easily dissolves in water. In medical practice, it is typically used for minor surgeries or diagnostic procedures. However, if ingested, this anesthetic can place significant stress on the heart, particularly when it reaches a certain dosage. It can suppress respiration, leading to heart failure and ultimately death. This anesthetic is a controlled substance that cannot be purchased at regular ease. Only medical professionals have access to it upon discovering the cause of his daughter's death. Mr. Gu immediately reported it to the police, understanding the gravity of the situation. The police quickly realized that this case was far from simple and promptly launched an investigation. Through their investigation, the police learned that Gusu had a cheerful personality, maintained good relationships with her colleagues, and her daily mood was stable. Her co-workers mentioned that 2 days before the Mid-Autumn Festival, Gusu had asked Chu Xiaochang to bring medicine to another colleague. The couple appeared to be very affectionate. She also revealed that this year they didn't plan to give mooncakes to Chu's parents, but instead would send them a monetary gift directly. None of these details indicated that Gusu had any intention of committing suicide, so the police ruled out this possibility. The police then reviewed the hospital's medication records and interviewed Guosu's primary doctor through this investigation. They confirmed that she had not been administered ketamine on the day of her death. This allowed the police to rule out the possibility of a hospital overdose. This left only one possibility. Gusu had been murdered. The most likely suspect, someone with easy access to ketamine and the ability to secretly administer it in her daily life, was her husband Chu Xiaochang. Given his suspicious behavior during the autopsy, the police decided to conduct a thorough investigation of Chu Xiaochang not long after they found his signature on the hospital records for obtaining the anesthetic, as well as the discarded medicine packaging he had thrown away after poisoning his wife. After compiling the evidence on the evening of September 23, 2003, Huqiu District Police took Chu Xiaoyang into criminal custody. When the police arrived, Chu Xiaochang was under the impression that his wife's body had already been cremated, so he wasn't concerned and was at his lover's house. After 12 hours of silence in the face of overwhelming evidence, Chu Xiaochang finally admitted that he had poisoned Gusu, leading to her death. Facing this harsh reality, Mr. Gu Surong felt an overwhelming sense of pain and blamed himself, saying, "It's all my fault. If it weren't for me, my daughter wouldn't have died." But why did Chu Xiaochang resort to poisoning and murdering his own wife? Chu Xiaochang was born in 1969 in Pingjiang District, Suzhou City, China. From a young age, his family was impoverished and daily life was extremely difficult. Growing up in such an environment made him fiercely competitive, driving him to excel in everything he did. Whether in academics or any other aspect of life, in 1987, Chu Xiaochang was admitted to Suzhou Medical University with outstanding grades. However, his family did not support this decision, but believing that the path he had chosen was too challenging and encouraging him to pursue a different direction. Despite this, Chu Xiaochang was resolute in his choice, as it was not only a set goal but also a lifelong dream. The more his family opposed him, the more determined he became to prove them wrong. By succeeding during his time at university, Chu Xiaochang not only studied diligently but also actively participated in school activities, earning high regard from both his teachers and peers. After graduating with honors in 1992, Chu Xiaochang was assigned to intern at Pingjiang District People's Hospital. At that time, this position was highly coveted, as even though he was only an intern, with perseverance and hard work, becoming a full-fledged doctor was just a matter of time. However, this seemingly admirable path did not satisfy Chu Xiaochang. He didn't want to spend too much time and effort just to secure a position as a senior doctor at the hospital. Instead, he decided to further his education to open up more opportunities. Chu Xiaoyang then applied for the graduate program at his alma mater. There's no denying his academic prowess as he passed the entrance exams for graduate school. Just over a year later, this achievement led him to meet the most influential person in his life, his graduate advisor, Professor Guy Rong. At that time, Guy Rong was the head of the thoracic surgery department at the second affiliated hospital of Suzhou Medical University, a renowned medical expert in the region and a former standing committee member of the Suzhou People's Congress. Being accepted as his student was an incredibly fortunate opportunity for Chu Xie-chong, continuing his outstanding academic performance, just as he had during his undergraduate years. Chu Xie-chong also served as a student council officer and was a member of the Communist Party of China. These qualities made Professor Guo highly regard this talented young man. Chu Xiaochong understood that gaining his professor's recognition could completely change his future, so he often went out of his way to assist Professor Gu with small tasks like buying groceries or exchanging gas cylinders in an effort to grow closer to him. But even Chu Xie-chong didn't anticipate that the professor would want to match him with his daughter to outsiders. Gu Xirong appeared to have a successful career and a happy life, but as the saying goes, every family has its own troubles, and there was one issue that constantly weighed on his mind, causing him to frown whenever he thought about it. As it turned out, he had two daughters, Gu and Wu Jing, but neither of them wanted to pursue a career in medicine. They often joked with him, saying telling someone to study medicine is a curse. Mr. Gu could only shake his head and smile faintly. However, the thought of spending his entire life in the medical field without anyone to carry on his legacy after he was gone left him with a deep sense of regret. Yet more concerning to him than this was the matter of his eldest daughter. Jisu's marriage prospects after graduating from college. Gusu worked as an accountant at a construction inspection station. She had a somewhat introverted personality and wasn't interested in makeup or fashion. As a result, even at nearly 26 years old, she had not found a suitable partner, let alone considered marriage or starting a family. As time passed, the aging father grew increasingly worried about this. The arrival of Chu Xie-chong brought a glimmer of hope. A talented young man like Chu Xie-chong with outstanding academic achievements, excellent communication skills, and a passion for medicine was a rare find if he could become his son-in-law. Not only would his daughter have a good husband, but Mr. Gu's career would also have a worthy successor. It seemed like a perfect solution. So Gurong inquired about Chu Xie-young's romantic life. If he already had a girlfriend, Mr. Gu would have dropped the idea. However, after some hesitation, Chu Xie-chong shyly admitted to his professor that he didn't have a girlfriend. This prompted Mr. Gu to pursue his plan to match his daughter Gus Su with his promising student. To his surprise, Gusu and Chu Xie-chong quickly developed feelings for each other, and it wasn't long before they began dating by 1997 in front of friends and family. Chu Xie-chong and Gu walked down the aisle together during the wedding. Chu Xie-chong promised his father-in-law that he would take good care of his daughter, seeing the young couple whom he had brought together so full of happiness. Mr. Gu felt a deep sense of joy. After Chu Xie-chong completed his graduate studies, his father-in-law's connections helped him secure a position at Suzhou Children's Hospital. The benefits and advancement opportunities there were significantly better than at the district hospital where he had previously worked. In truth, Chu Xie-chong was also highly skilled in his field. The Suzhou Evening News published a report on October 8, 2003, about a successful laparoscopic surgery performed on a young boy with congenital biliary atria at Suzhou Children's Hospital. This was the first surgery of its kind in China, and the boy undergoing the procedure was only 2 months old at the time. The lead surgeon for this operation was Chu Xie-young, demonstrating his advanced medical expertise for years into their marriage. Gusu gave birth to a baby girl. To many, Chu Xie-chong appeared to be a man who had it all. He had married the professor's daughter, enjoyed a harmonious and happy family life, and had a promising career with a bright future ahead. However, in the eyes of Chu Xie-chang's parents, things were not as ideal. They believed that their son's marriage to Jisu was a mistake in the fall of 1997 while working at an engineering station in Haitian Xinjiang Chuxia. Chang's father unexpectedly received a letter from his son. In the letter, Chu Xie-chong expressed his wish for his parents to attend his wedding to Gusu. This puzzled his father greatly, as his son's girlfriend wasn't named Gu. It turned out that before meeting Gusu, Chu Xie-chong had been in a long-term relationship with a primary school teacher. They were deeply in love and had even discussed marriage. However, in order to gain favor with his professor and secure a quicker path to career advancement, Chusia Chang decided to break up with his girlfriend of many years. His parents met Gusu for the first time at the wedding. They were not pleased with their new daughter-in-law, as their son's previous girlfriend was tall and beautiful, while Gusu was quite plain and petite. Chusia Chang had always had a positive public image and was well-liked by many at Suzhou Children's Hospital. Chusia Chang was also highly regarded by many of the patients' families, who praised him for his skill and humble demeanor. Whenever GSU's colleagues had health issues, they would often seek out Chusia Young for help, and he would proactively bring them medicine. As a result, everyone had a very favorable impression of him. Ding, a colleague who had worked with Gu for 8 years, always believed that the couple was a perfect match. The husband had a successful career and was always willing to help others. Meanwhile, Gusu had been promoted to department head just that July. Additionally, Chusia Chang's personality was gentle, humble, and he never instigated conflicts with anyone. 2 days before the Mid-Autumn Festival, Chusia Chang brought medicine to one of Gus Su's colleagues. Just then, another colleague had returned from a business trip bringing gifts from their hometown, so everyone gathered to enjoy them. Gusu playfully said to her husband, "Feed me, Chuya." Chang smiled and replied, "I fed you before you're still like a child." This interaction made everyone around them feel that they were a sweet couple. Colleagues remarked that if the company were to hold a contest for the ideal couple, they would all vote for Chusia Chang and his wife. But all of this was merely a facade that Chusia Chang maintained in front of others. In reality, Chuya Chang and Gusu didn't share the loving relationship that everyone believed they had. In fact, it could be said that they were married in name only, without any real emotional bond from the beginning. Chusia Chang never loved Gusu. He married her solely for the benefits that her family could provide. He knew that his rapid career advancement was entirely due to the support of his father-in-law shortly after their marriage at the end of 1997. CHXA. Chang's parents' home was demolished with nowhere else to stay. They hoped to temporarily live with their son until their new home was built. However, they ended up living in the basement of their son's new house. For 10 months, Chuya Chang's mother believed that the situation wasn't her son's fault, but rather that his wife was the one who didn't agree to the arrangement. She pointed out that the house was allocated to them by Gus's workplace. However, Chusia Chang's parents did acknowledge that after the birth of their granddaughter, their daughter-in-law treated them better. Chusia Chang's mother thought this was because they had worked hard to take care of their granddaughter. However, Jisu's colleagues felt that she treated her in-laws even better than she treated her own parents every day. After work, she would travel a long distance to have dinner at her in-laws' home. She was also quite generous with them, and for the Mid-Autumn Festival, she prepared a special red envelope with 600 yuan, around $80, just for them. However, Chusia Chang's father explained that this money was mainly to cover the cost of food, as they would go out of their way to prepare dishes that their daughter-in-law liked. Meanwhile, he and his wife would eat very simply, sometimes just having leftovers. On the other hand, Chi Young's family always felt that Gus's family looked down on them because they were workers. His father recalled an example. A week after Chusia Young's wedding, his brother also got married. They chose a slightly more upscale hotel for the wedding, and the Gu family reacted by yelling and refusing to attend from this. It's clear that in this marriage, Chu Xa Chang felt like he was constantly catering to his wife and her family. Initially, he may not have minded, but over time, his resentment grew deeper. Additionally, Ali, with his competitive nature, he felt that he never received the respect he deserved from Gu. As a result, the relationship between the couple became increasingly strained. They were merely playing the role of a loving couple in front of others. This was also confirmed by those close to the couple. A close friend of theirs recounted that during the day, both would go to work, and in the evening, they would go to Cho DW Sia Young's parents' house for dinner and to care for their daughter at home. Gusu would watch TV and text her friends, while Chusia Chang would go online or prepare for his doctoral studies. They felt they had nothing to talk about, so their married life just drifted along in a dull, unremarkable way. Another close friend of Gu believed that both of them were too superficial, even if there was conflict between them. They wouldn't talk about it, and they even waited for the other to bring up the topic of divorce. First, Gusu had once confided in this friend that if Chu Zia-young ever suggested a divorce, she would definitely agree. However, Gus's friend also mentioned that because Gusu felt inferior due to her lower educational background, while Chu Zia-chang was a master's degree holder, she often felt somewhat inadequate. As a result, Gusu was very indulgent toward her husband. She was also very considerate of him. For instance, when Chu Zia-chang started losing his hair, Gusu researched various folk remedies and specialized treatments, even asking someone to bring back products from Shanghai. Unfortunately, Chu Xe-chong was not moved by these gestures from Gusu. While he outwardly appeared to be a loving husband, in reality, he had long since betrayed his wife. Moreover, he was a true philanderer, not just involved with one or two women, but entangled in numerous extramarital affairs. Chu Xia-young was known as a talented young man, and he was surrounded the kitchen meticulously washing the coffee cup that had contained the anesthetic. After Gu passed away, he used by many young, beautiful nurses who were drawn to him in 2000. Chu Xia-chong became infatuated with a beautiful nurse named Zhang at the hospital and quickly developed an extramarital relationship with her. After experiencing the thrill of infidelity, he continued to engage in affairs with several other nurses and interns. These women, aside from being young, attractive, and physically appealing, provided him with something more important, a sense of respect that he craved. In truth, Gusu wasn't entirely unaware of her husband's infidelity. There was an incident where Chu Zia-chang brought one of his mistresses home, and Gu caught them in the act. However, Chu Zia-chang explained it away, saying the woman was just a patient or a pharmaceutical representative visiting to discuss medications. Whenever Chu Zia-chang texted his lovers, he was always very secretive. As a result, Gusu had a vague sense that something wasn't right. But perhaps out of pride, she only confided in her sister about her suspicions and never told her parents. Among the many women Chu Zia-chang was involved with, his closest relationships were with a doctor named Zhang Fan, who worked at a district-level hospital, and a nurse at his own hospital. Of these, the woman he cared for most was Zhang Fan, but she continuously pressured him to divorce Gusu deep down. However, Chu Zia-chang knew that divorcing Guosu was out of the question. It wasn't because he still had feelings for her, but because the Gu family would never let him off easily, and he feared the social backlash. Simply put, he didn't want a divorce because he was afraid of losing the reputation and benefits he had worked so hard to achieve. Thus, on one hand, Chu Zia-chang enjoyed the career benefits that his wife and her family provided, while on the other, he secretly began plotting a cruel scheme in his mind if Gu were to die suddenly. After a year or two, his understanding father-in-law would surely not prevent him from remarrying. Chu Xiaochang started bringing anesthetic home every day after work, secretly mixing it into his wife's coffee or tea. According to his plan, by continuing to poison her in small doses, Gusu would eventually die from what appeared to be heart disease, and no one would suspect foul play. This malicious behavior continued for 2 years. However, his mistress Zhang Fan began to apply increasing pressure, telling him that if he didn't divorce, they would have to end their relationship. By this time, it was well known that Gusu had started developing heart problems over the past 2 years. On August 27th and September 5th, 2003, Chu Zia-chang administered 3 doses of the anesthetic into his wife's coffee on each occasion to create an alibi, after preparing the coffee and instructing his wife to drink it. While it was still hot, he hurried off to his shift at the hospital after drinking the drug. Like coffee, Gusu quickly became ill in unbearable pain. She called her husband 3 times, but he didn't return. Desperate, she was forced to call her father when Gurung frantically rushed to his daughter's house. He found that Chu Zia-chang had arrived before him. Chu appeared to be very concerned, sitting beside his wife, but doing nothing to help seeing this. Mr. Gu angrily exclaimed, "You're a doctor too. Why aren't you doing anything? Just saying a few words won't ease her pain." He then quickly took his daughter to the hospital, but despite the tests, the cause of her symptoms couldn't be determined. Fortunately, Gusu managed to pull through after these 2 tests. Chu Zia-chang believed the time was ripe by now. If Gusu died from heart failure, no one would likely suspect foul play. Finally, on September 11th, while Gusu was taking a bath, he added 5 doses of ketamine to her coffee, then brought it to her, saying sweetly, My love, after you drink your coffee and enjoy some mooncakes, let's go for a walk and admire the moon. About 10 minutes after drinking the drugged coffee, Gusu began to feel dizzy and her heartbeat gradually slowed. Chu Sia-chung helped her to the bedroom and laid her down, then stood outside the room watching as she struggled with death. In her agony, Gusu called out to her husband several times, but he coldly ignored her. According to Chu Sia-sh's later confession, while waiting for his wife to die, he spent over 2 minutes in the kitchen meticulously washing the coffee cup that had contained the anesthetic after Gu passed away. He used the same cup to make coffee for himself. This shows just how cold and calculating his mindset was around 9:50 p.m., more than 2 hours after Gu first showed symptoms and realizing that she was nearing death. Chu Xa-chang finally picked up the phone to call his in-laws and sister-in-law. He told them that Sue had relapsed into her old condition, and at this time it was very serious. Gu Jing, knowing that her sister had often experienced dizziness over the past 2 years but had never faced anything this severe, wasn't overly worried at that moment. After making the calls, Chu Sia-chung began calling for help from the neighbors and rushed his wife to a nearby hospital for emergency treatment. At the time, Gus's parents were 50 kilometers away, enjoying the moonlight in Xishan. Upon receiving the call from their son-in-law, they hurried to the hospital. Unfortunately, they didn't arrive in time to see their daughter one last time. Although Mr. Gusirong ultimately couldn't save his daughter, his experience and knowledge ensured that the person responsible for her death paid the price. On January 2, 2004, the Suzhou Intermediate People's Court held a trial for Chu Sia-chung. He was found guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced to death. However, Chu Sia-chung was dissatisfied with the verdict and appeal. On June 22 of the same year, the Jiangsu Provincial High People's Court issued its final ruling upholding the original sentence. Since the case came to light, those who knew Chu Sia-chung were shocked. When they learned the truth, they believed he must have been mentally unstable beyond the surprise and confusion. There was also a deep sense of fear. How could someone who appeared so perfect like Chu Sia-chung hide such a terrifying side? Dear viewers, modern life can sometimes blind people to the temptations of material wealth and status. However, allowing greed to override conscience as Chu Sia-chung did is the shortest path to moral collapse, leading to punishment by the law. When a person is willing to sacrifice everything, including love and the lives of their loved ones, just to achieve their selfish goals, they not only lose their humanity, but also plunge themselves into an inescapable abyss. Story 2, the case took place in Shibuya Ward, Tokyo, Japan. A densely populated area within the ward is a park named Yoyogi, surrounded by many residential neighborhoods. Among them is a high-end apartment building home to a married couple. The husband, Yukar Mita-shea, was an asset analyst at the Japanese branch of Morgan Stanley. His wife, Corey Mita-shea, was a homemaker. The Mita-shea couple was well-mannered and always dressed impeccably when they went out, making them the envy of others. However, in 2006, a tragic incident befell this family. On December 15, 2006. A Friday morning, a visibly distressed woman arrived at the Shibuya Ward police station to report an incident. She stated that her husband had been missing for 3 days and she needed police assistance in finding him. Seeing how upset she was, the police reassured her and asked her to calmly recount the events. The woman identified herself as Ki Mita-shea, 32 years old, and said her husband was Yukar Mahashi, 30 years old. 3 days earlier, in the early hours of October 12th, her husband had returned home drunk. She complained about his condition, leading to an argument between them. Her husband angrily left the house, and as she was also very upset, she didn't stop him. In the past, their arguments usually ended with him apologizing and making amends, but this time he had been gone for 3 days without any contact. Fearing for his safety, she decided to report the situation to the police and seek their help. According to the investigation, the missing person, Yukar MIT Sahashi, was born in North Kyushu and studied law at Chuei University. After graduating, he worked at a law firm in Tokyo. During a party, Yukar met Corey, a woman 2 years his senior who worked for one Hong company. Their relationship quickly blossomed and they began living together a year later. They got married initially. Euchre's salary was modest, and the family's finances were mainly supported by his wife. However, 2 years into their marriage, at the age of 29, Euchre was suddenly hired by the Japanese branch of Morgan Stanley as an asset analyst with an annual salary of 13 million yen, approximately $90,000 at the current exchange rate. With this increase in income, the couple moved to a luxury apartment in the Fushi area of Shibuya Ward. Their apartment was on the 10th floor and was not far from Yoyogi Park. Following this, his wife left her job to become a homemaker. Their life seemed to be going well, and no one could have predicted that, after a single argument, Euchre would never return home. The police contacted Yuck's company to see if they knew of his whereabouts. The company confirmed that Euchre had not been at work for several days, and they were also concerned about his absence. In fact, just yesterday, the company had announced his promotion to department manager, but they had been unable to reach him to discuss the new role. The police initially suspected that Yuck's disappearance might be related to his promotion. However, after investigating at his workplace, they found that Euchre had good relationships with his colleagues who respected him greatly, and there appeared to be no conflicts related to his job. The police then contacted the parents and acquaintances of the missing person, but all reported that they had not been in touch with Euchre for a long time and didn't know his whereabouts the following morning around 8 a.m. The Shinjuku Ward Police in Tokyo received a report. The caller, an office worker, mentioned that a suspicious blood-stained plastic bag had been found on a road near a language school. Upon receiving the report, the police immediately arrived at the scene and cordoned off the area inside the bag, which had 2 layers. The police discovered a dismembered body, specifically the upper torso without the head, left arm, and right hand. The lower body from the waist down was missing. The body was unclothed, and the victim appeared to be a male around 30 years old. The cuts on the body were uneven, leading the police to suspect that the victim had been dismembered with a saw or a similar tool. The surface of the body had traces of soil, suggesting that the victim might have been buried underground before being disposed of at the scene at the site. The police found no items that could help identify the victim, nor were the other body parts recovered. The victim's identity remains unknown. At this time, the forensic pathologist concluded that the victim had died within the past week, but the exact time and cause of death could not yet be determined. The low where the body was found is quite close to Kabukicho, a well-known red light district which is often associated with the underworld. Additionally, Shinjuku Ward has seen several homicides in the past, with dismemberment being a common method used by criminal gangs to intimidate rivals and complicate the identification of the victims. The police suspect that this case might be connected to an underworld conflict to identify the victim. The police reviewed missing persons reports from the past week. The Shinjuku police quickly took note of a missing persons report filed in Shibuya Ward just the day before the missing person was Yukar MIT Sahashi, a 30-year-old whose disappearance coincided with the estimated time of the victim's death. Following this, the police departments of Shinjuku and Shibuya coordinated their investigation. They visited Yuck's home to gather more information. Yuck's wife, Corey, described her husband as being 5 feet 5 inches tall with a slender build and having a surgical scar on the right side of his chest. However, the body found in Shinjuku had no such scar, a chest circumference of 32 inches, large arms, and an overall much larger physique, which didn't match Yuck's description. A week after the initial discovery, a new development occurred around 3 p.m. In Kamiyamacho, a woman was walking her Shiba Inu dog. As they passed by the garden of a house, the dog suddenly stopped and began barking loudly towards the inside. She tried to pull the dog away, but it broke free from its leash and dashed straight into the garden. Worried that her dog might disturb the homeowners, the woman hurried after it. The house was quite large, but appeared to have been abandoned for some time. The garden gate was barely secured, making it easy for the dog to knock it open upon entering. The woman saw that the garden was overgrown with weeds. Not far from the gate, the dog was wagging its tail, barking continuously at something on the ground as she approached. She was horrified to see part of a human body. The lower half was unclothed and emitted a strong, foul odor. Regaining her composure, the woman shakily took out her phone and called the police. The Shibuya Ward police quickly arrived at the scene. Upon inspection, they found that the victim was a male whose body had been severed at the waist. The cuts were uneven, possibly made with a saw or a similar tool. Given the level of decomposition, it was estimated that the time of death was around 2 weeks prior. The legs had traces of soil, but it was unclear whether the soil was from this garden or elsewhere. The police noted several similarities between this case and the one in Shinjuku ward from not long ago, leading them to suspect a connection between the two. To verify this, forensic pathologists compared the body parts found in Shinjuku with those discovered in Shibuya. Through DNA analysis and other factors, the results confirmed that the body parts belonged to the same person. The victim was a tall, large-framed individual, estimated to be between 5.75 feet and 6 feet in height. The body showed no signs of injury or scars due to the absence of head and fingers. The victim's identity could not be determined. However, the police quickly noticed something suspicious. The location where the lower half of the body was found was only about 500 meters from the home of the missing person, Yukar MIT Sahashi. Could this be just a coincidence earlier? Yuk's wife stated that her husband was quite short, only 5.45 feet tall with a slender build and a noticeable scar. In contrast, the victim was at least 5.75 feet tall, had a large build, and bore no scars. Despite these stark differences in physical appearance, the police still suspected of between the two individuals. With this suspicion in mind, the police visited Yuk's home once again. This time they noticed some changes the house was undergoing. Renovation's wallpaper had been stripped and most of the furniture was covered with white sheets. However, given that the new year was approaching, such renovations were not uncommon when questioned by the police. Corey maintained her previous statements, insisting that the victim's physical characteristics did not match those of her husband, and affirming that her husband could not possibly be the victim. The police then shifted their investigation, asking if her husband had any conflicts with anyone. Key mentioned that her husband had never had any disputes with others, although during his college years he had accrued some debt from playing Pinko, a type of gambling game. However, he later secured a good job and paid off his debts, so she didn't believe he had any enemies. This visit yielded no significant new information, but the investigators sensed that something was amiss. They then attempted to contact people who knew Euchre, hoping to uncover any leads. However, by this time it was late December, and Yuk's friends, family, and colleagues were reluctant to discuss such matters with the new year. Approaching a time when such topics were considered inauspicious, they preferred to wait until after the new year to speak with the police. After much effort, the police finally found someone willing to talk to Tanaka, a 45-year-old senior colleague of Euchre after graduating from university. Euchre worked at a law firm where Tanaka was one of the associate attorneys. It was Tanaka who recommended Euchre for a position at a financial company. The two had a good relationship, and Tanaka was deeply concerned about Yuk's disappearance. Tanaka shared a lot of information about Euchre with the police, noting that Euchre was a capable individual with an outgoing personality. During the conversation, an idea suddenly struck. One of the investigators, who then asked Tanaka about Yuka's physical appearance, Tanaka described Euchre as being quite tall, around 593 feet, with a strong and muscular build. As he had played rugby since childhood, the police further inquired if Euchre had any tattoos or scars, particularly on his chest. After thinking for a moment, Tanaka said, "We went to a hot spring together several times, and I never noticed any tattoos or scars on him." Following the conversation with Tanaka, the police immediately checked Yuk's medical records and discovered that he had never undergone any surgery on his chest at this point. The police finally uncovered a significant lead. It was highly likely that Yuk's wife Corey had lied. To confirm the suspicion, the police contacted Yuk's parents and requested their call operation for a DNA test. The results were quickly returned, confirming that the victim was indeed Euchre. Corey had deliberately misrepresented her husband's identifying features significantly. Hindering the police investigation, the police recalled their previous encounters with Corey when she initially reported her husband missing. She appeared very anxious and fearful for his safety. However, despite not knowing whether her husband was alive or dead, she proceeded to renovate their home alone. Actions that now seemed highly suspicious. Yuka's apartment was located in a high-end residential complex with excellent security access to the building. Required a keycard swipe, and the lobby on the first floor was equipped with surveillance cameras. The investigators then visited the building's management office to request access to the keycard data and surveillance footage. On October 12th, they discovered that at 3:50 a.m., Yuka returned to the apartment alone. He appeared to be staggering, likely drunk, as he made his way toward the elevator. After entering the elevator, he was no longer seen on camera. The police asked the building manager if there were any other exits. Besides the main entrance, the manager replied that other than the main door, there was only an emergency exit for fire escapes. This exit is located in the management office and is monitored 24/7. If the emergency door is open, the system automatically records it, and in the event of a fire, the door opens automatically, otherwise it remains locked after checking the records. It was confirmed that the emergency exit was not opened on October 12th. At this point, the police had enough evidence to conclude that Key was lying. Her husband never left the apartment that night. During the investigation, a close colleague of Yukar voluntarily contacted the police to inquire about the case's progress, while the police couldn't disclose investigation details. They took the opportunity to ask him about any unusual occurrences at Yuk's home. The colleague mentioned that he hadn't noticed anything strange, but there was one occasion when Corey called the company's HR manager requesting that Yuka's year-end bonus be paid out. The HR manager, aware that Yuka was still missing and with the situation unresolved, refused her request. Following this lead, the police reviewed the building's surveillance footage from October 12th onward. They discovered that at 10 p.m. on October 15th, Corey, dressed in sports R, was seen pulling a large suitcase as she exited the elevator. 4 hours later, she swiped her key card to re-enter the building. Her outfit remained unchanged, but the large suitcase was gone. 15 minutes later, CI was once again seen leaving the elevator, this time pushing a cart with a large cardboard box on it. 20 minutes later, she returned to the apartment, empty-handed. Based on these clues, the police identified a black taxi according to the driver's testimony and the vehicle's route history at 10:05 p.m. That evening, the driver picked up Corey in front of the building. She was carrying a large suitcase. After getting in the car, she requested to go to Shinjuku. As the taxi drove along a road near the train tracks in Shinjuku, the driver noticed an unpleasant smell coming from the suitcase and asked, "What's in your suitcase? It seems to have an odor." Upon hearing this, Corey immediately asked the driver to stop the car. At first, the taxi driver thought she wanted to catch a late-night bus in Shinjuku, so her request to stop the car midway seemed puzzling to him, but he still complied and stopped the car after reviewing the surveillance footage. The driver confirmed that the woman in the video was the same person who had ridden in his taxi that night. Therefore, the police had reason to suspect that the suitcase contained parts of Yuk's body, which were discovered the following day. 1 month after the incident, the police returned to Corey's home, arrested her on charges of murder, and conducted a thorough search of the house. Compared to their previous visit, Yuk's home had undergone even more changes. The walls had been repaired, the flooring had been completely replaced, and all the furniture had disappeared. Leaving only a few articles of clothing behind, the house was now empty, and the police found it hard to imagine how Corey had been living there all this time. On the balcony, the police discovered a nightstand with its doors removed filled with dark soil. They collected a sample of the soil and sealed it for analysis. The results revealed that the soil was typical potting soil but contained traces of blood. DNA testing confirmed that the blood in the soil belonged to the victim, Yuka. Based on this evidence, the police concluded that the apartment was indeed the initial crime scene. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, Key finally confessed to the crime and revealed the full details of what had happened at around 4 a.m. On October 12th, Yuka returned home drunk. Key wanted to discuss divorce with him, but the conversation quickly escalated into a heated argument. Afterward, Yuka retreated to the bedroom by 6 a.m. As daylight began to break, Kai still couldn't sleep and her anger continued to grow. She grabbed a wine bottle from the bedroom and struck her sleeping husband on the head. She hit him repeatedly until she finally stopped in. A day she heard Yukar weakly whisper, "Why?" before he fell silent. Once she regained her composure, CI realized she had committed a terrible crime and felt completely trapped, unsure of what to do next. As expected, at 9 a.m. that morning, Yuk's company repeatedly called because he hadn't shown up for work without notifying anyone. but Corey was too afraid to answer the phone the next day. One of Yuck's colleagues called Corey to ask if she knew where her husband was. Corey claimed she didn't know, perhaps sensing something unusual in her voice. The colleague said, "I'd like to come by and check on you." KY immediately felt panicked. She feared raising suspicion but didn't dare to refuse, so she reluctantly agreed to have Yuck's colleague visit their home over the weekend after hanging up the phone. Corey began to think of how to handle the situation since the incident Yuka's body had been hidden under the bed in the bedroom. Although it was winter and the temperatures were low, she knew that after a few more days the body would inevitably start to smell. Knowing that Yuka's colleague would be visiting over the weekend, she decided she needed to quickly move the body out of the apartment. However, Key was petite and couldn't move Sue's large body by herself after trying various methods. Unsuccessfully, she decided to dismember the body 3 days after the crime. Key went out and purchased a handsaw, a large suitcase, a simple cart, and a waterproof tarp. Additionally, to avoid suspicion, she bought some soil. KY purchased the soil from 2 different stores, first buying 8 small bags each containing 15 lit, and then buying 2 larger bags each containing 880 liters. Once she had all the supplies Kai set to work, she flipped the nightstand in the bedroom onto the floor, removed the cabinet doors, and lined the inside with the waterproof tarp. She then filled the bottom and sides with soil, turning it into a makeshift soil-covered operating table. Afterward, she placed her husband's body inside the cabinet and began the dismemberment process. As she sawed, blood from the body seeped into the soil, reducing the need for cleanup. Once she finished, she buried the body parts in the soil to slow the decomposition process. That day, Kai checked her husband's phone and computer and discovered an email from his company informing Euchre that he was being promoted to department manager with an annual salary increase of 2 million yen. Additionally, his year-end bonus was scheduled to be paid out on the 9th of the following month. Upon seeing this news, Key hatched a plan to report her husband missing and then go to the company to claim this money at 9 a.m. On October 15th, Corey went to the local police station to report that her husband was missing, pretending to be worried about his disappearance. Later that evening, she dug up her husband's upper body from the soil, placed it in 2 layers of white plastic bags, and then packed it into a suitcase, intending to dispose of it near the train tracks in Shinjuku by 10 p.m. Corey went downstairs and hailed a taxi. While en route, the driver noticed a strange smell and asked about it, which scared Corey, leading her to abruptly request that the car stop. She then walked along the road, dragging the suitcase behind her. However, she soon became concerned that the noise of the suitcase wheels might draw attention, so she stopped. After a short distance next to the road was a green belt area with a barbed wire fence on the outer edge. Lacking the strength to throw the suitcase over the fence, she abandoned it in the bushes. She then discarded the empty suitcase at a nearby intersection. The next morning, a homeless man found the suitcase. CI returned to the apartment at 2 a.m., but she was too tense to sleep, still on edge. She took the remaining body parts from the soil and placed them in a large cardboard box, which she loaded onto a cart. The experience from the previous night made her too afraid to call a taxi again as she moved through the silent night. The noise from the cart was much louder than she had anticipated when she reached Kamiyamacho. Corey didn't dare to go any further. Looking around, she noticed an abandoned house by the roadside. The garden gate was unlocked, so she easily pushed the car inside, dumped the body parts, and then discarded the cart and the empty cardboard box at a nearby garbage dump. The next morning, the white plastic bag left in the bushes near the railroad tracks was discovered by someone the following afternoon. The police came to C's house to ask about her husband's identifying features. After the police left, Corey dug up her husband's head, placed it in a travel bag, and took a train to Chiba City, 25 kilometers away. By the time she arrived, it was already dark. Corey cautiously avoided people as she made her way to a secluded grassy area in Harumi Park. She dug a 35 km deep hole and buried her husband's head there. Upon returning home, Corey put the left arm, right hand, and some household trash into a garbage bag and disposed of it in a nearby alley. Where few people passed by after handling everything, she still wasn't completely at ease, so she decided to clean the apartment once again to remove any remaining traces on December the 22nd. Sai hired someone to replace the wallpaper and flooring to address her financial situation. She also took a part-time job at a cafe. During this time, many people tried to contact Euchre. His phone was filled with missed calls and unread messages on Christmas Eve after finishing her shift at the cafe. Corey used her husband's phone to send messages to his parents and a few acquaintances saying, "I want to take a break for a while, so please don't worry," in the days that followed. Apart from her shifts at the cafe, CI spent all her time renovating the house on January 4th. She packed up the blankets, sheets, pillows, and mattress from the bedroom and sent them to her hometown with a note that read, "Please burn all of this for me." Seeing the empty room, Corey felt much lighter, though a sense of unease still lingered on the morning of January 10th. Corey called her husband's company again to inquire about the year-end bonus that had yet to be paid. That very afternoon, she was officially arrested by the police. Following C's confession, the police found the head buried in the park and the hands hidden in a trash bag. The items she had sent to her hometown, such as the bedsheets and blankets, were still sitting outside her old home. Unclaimed, it turned out that her parents had moved away. The autopsy results revealed 8 blunt force trauma wounds on the skull. The cause of death was determined to be a traumatic brain injury. When asked about her motive, Corey unexpectedly broke down, crying uncontrollably as she recounted the frustrations and grievances she had endured in the past. Corey Mita Shea, whose real name was Ki Kuchi, was born on July 7, 1974 in Kosa City, Sama Prefecture. She was the eldest of 3 siblings, and her father ran a printing company, making the family quite affluent. However, her father was very strict with his children, especially with Corey, to prevent her from dating too early. He forced her to attend an all-girls school. From middle school through high school, he frequently lectured her, molding her into a gentle, elegant daughter with the hope that she would one day become a flight attendant and ideally marry a foreigner. As Corey approached high school graduation and prepared to take university entrance exams, her father still wanted her to apply to a women's university. This time, Corey fiercely resisted. Her life had been controlled by her father. From a young age, she was not allowed to disobey, or she would be punished, even when she fell and bled. She wasn't allowed to cry. As a result, Corey longed to escape her father's control. However, her rebellion was unsuccessful. She ended up following her father's wishes, passing the entrance exam for the English department at Sherlock Women's University, a prestigious school for the wealthy in Japan. Many people remarked that the girls who graduated from this school exuded an air of aristocratic elegance. Corey's father was very pleased when she was accepted into the university and sent her a monthly allowance of 400,000 yen, approximately $2,715 at the current exchange rate, which was significantly more than what her classmates received. Although Corey didn't have the freedom to choose her university, she finally escaped her father's control. With the generous allowance, she lived a life of freedom and comfort, indulging in luxury shopping as she pleased during her university years. Ki also entered at W. Hong Company. For a few months after graduating at the age of 24, followed her father's wishes and applied for a flight attendant position at an airline, but she was rejected. Her father was furious and demanded that she return home to find a job, but Corey didn't want to go back. Even after her allowance was cut off, she was determined to stay in Tokyo and support herself. KY began working at a bar as a hostess and continued her extravagant lifestyle. During this time, she met a wealthy man, a company director in his 50s. This man was kind, attentive, and generous to Kai, giving her 2 million yen per month, equivalent to about $133,500. 4 years later, the man grew tired of Corey and ended the relationship. He even introduced her to the son of one of his wealthy friends. However, after dating for some time, Corey and the son eventually broke up. Losing this stable support caused Corey's life to spiral downward. Nevertheless, she refused to live a normal life. Kai continued attending lavish parties, claiming to be a full-time employee at W. Hong Company to seek new opportunities at a party. Corey, then 28 years old, met Yukar Mahashi, a man 2 years younger than her. The two began dating and soon moved in together. Yukar knew nothing about Kay's past. He was captivated by her elegance and would proudly tell his friends, "She's the woman of my dreams." A year later, Key went for a medical checkup and discovered she was 2 months pregnant. However, both of them were struggling financially, and Corey still had unpaid debts. She believed that in their current situation, they couldn't afford to raise a child, so she told Euchre that she didn't want to have the baby. Euchre, however, strongly opposed this. He spent all the money he had on an engagement ring, promising to find a better job and begging her to keep the baby. So they got married. Since they had no money, they didn't have a wedding ceremony, only inviting a few friends and family members for a simple meal. None of Corey's family attended shortly after their marriage. Euchre gave up on taking the bar exam and started working at various financial companies. One day, he excitedly told Corey that he had passed an interview at a company. However, Corey calmly informed him that she had already had an abortion. From that point on, their marriage began to deteriorate. 2 years later, Euchre started working at the Japanese branch of Morgan Stanley with an annual salary of 13 million yen. After saving up some money, they moved into a luxury apartment near Yoyogi Park. Although their living conditions improved, their relationship remained as cold as ever. One day, Euchre accidentally discovered that Corey was having an affair. In a fit of rage, he confined her in their home for 2 days, not allowing her to leave, and cut off all her credit cards. Corey had a difficult time escaping. She ran to her parents' house for help. However, her father coldly told her that she had brought this situation upon herself, feeling helpless. Corey had no voice but to stay with her lover. However, just a few days later, Euchre tracked her down and brutally beat her again. Breaking her nose, Corey's lover reported the incident to the police. The authorities then took Corey, who was injured, to a women's shelter for protection. Many people advised Corey to get a divorce, and in truth, she had already been quietly planning it. Kay's lover, who was a lawyer, gave her some legal advice. As a result, Kay intended to ask her husband to sign an agreement stating that if their marriage ended due to Euchre's fault, he would have to compensate her with no less than 36 million yen, which is equivalent to $245,000. Corey's lover suggested that even though Euchre's abuse was triggered by her infidelity, making her at fault, if Euchre signed this agreement, it would legally be considered that they had reconciled later. If Euchre continued to abuse Corey or showed signs of infidelity, she could divorce him and claim the compensation during a subsequent reconciliation attempt. Corey followed her lover's advice and presented the agreement. Euchre agreed to sign it. However, in reality, they only reconciled in name. From that point on, Key began spending extravagantly, using her husband's money to buy luxury items. Euchre also started coming home less frequently, and they essentially lived separately. Noticing that her husband was spending less time at home, Key secretly hired a private detective to follow him. A few months later, Key discovered that Euchre was also seeing another woman. The private detective captured many photos of Euchre being intimate with his mistress Kai, decided to remain silent and continue, gathering evidence, planning to eventually sue her husband and claim the compensation. As time passed, in December 2006, the private detective provided Corey with some recordings of Euchre. In the recordings, Euchre spoke tenderly to his mistress about their future together. He said, "I'll help you with the housework. Let's have children and we should get married." These words felt like daggers to Kay's heart, further strengthening her resolve to divorce him at 4:00 a.m. on October 12th, after Euchre returned home drunk from a date with his mistress. Kai decided to confront him. She presented evidence of his infidelity and expressed her desire for a divorce. Euchre became enraged, tore up the photos, and told her that he had evidence of her affair as well, and that even if they divorced, she wouldn't get a single yen from him. After saying this, he went into the bedroom. These words pushed Corey over the edge, leading her to lose control and ultimately murder her husband. 1 year after Kay's crime, another serious murder case occurred in Chiba Prefecture. The perpetrator, Ishibashi Nobuhiro, buried the victim's body in a bathtub, covered it with soil, and planted a tree to conceal it, then moved the bathtub to the balcony. Some people believe that Ishibashi copied Corey's method, as this approach was very rare, and the two cases occurred relatively close in time. A year after the crime case, trial took place at the Tokyo District Court. Kimita Shea was charged with murder and the unlawful disposal of a body at the trial. Corey admitted to all the charges. Her defense attorney argued that she had endured long-term domestic violence, suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, which led to hallucinations and impaired her ability to recognize and control her actions. The prosecution recommended a 20-5 prison sentence. Yuck's father, who appeared as a witness, requested that the court sentence Corey to life imprisonment. After 14 trial sessions spanning 5 months, the court reached a verdict. Kimita Shea was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The defense attorney disagreed with the court's decision and filed an appeal on February 6, 2010. The Tokyo High Court upheld the original sentence while the case has officially closed. Its lingering effects continue to haunt many people's minds. Is the 15-year prison sentence for Corey enough to serve as a deterrent and punish her, or is it merely the beginning of another tragedy? After the verdict was announced, public opinion in Japan sparked heated debates. Many argued that the sentence was too lenient for the heinous crime Corey committed. They were outraged by the cruelty and cold-blooded nature of Kay's actions in murdering her husband and then dismembering his body to cover up the crime. However, some believed the sentence was justified, considering that Corey had endured a suffocating marriage, suffering from long-term physical and emotional abuse. The psychological damage caused by domestic violence had driven Corey to lose her sanity, leading to her rash actions. Nevertheless, everyone agrees that this tragedy serves as a wake-up call for those trapped in unhappy and desperate marriages. Silence and endurance only pile on the tragedy instead of becoming a victim. One must find the courage to speak up and seek help to escape the vicious cycles of life. Story 3, the case takes place in northeastern Argentina in a city called Resistencia, the capital of Chaco province. In June 2023, a case in this area garnered significant public attention. A 28-year-old woman suddenly disappeared. The incident is closely linked to a powerful political family, sparking massive protests across the province. The central figure of this story is 28-year-old Cecilia Marlene. Her parents divorced when she was in elementary school, and she has a younger sister. The two sisters live together with their mother. Gloria, Cecilia's father, was a gambling addict, and as a result, Cecilia endured a lot of suffering from a young age. Whenever her father came home drunk, he would beat his wife and daughter, treating them as mere outlets for his anger. As for Gloria, she was deeply concerned for and loved her two daughters, especially Cecilia, whom she had struggled to bring into the world. Facing the relentless beatings from her inhumane husband, Gloria would shield her daughters, leaving her body covered in injuries. This was the main reason Cecilia's parents divorced Gloria, even agreed to let her ex-husband avoid paying monthly child support just to keep both of her daughters with her. In Cecilia's eyes, her mother was an incredible woman. As a result, Cecilia was obedient and intelligent. After graduating high school with excellent grades, she was accepted into the PRIU's Universidad Nacional del Nordeste, one of Argentina's top 6 universities. Upon graduation, Cecilia became a manager at a large company, earning a fairly substantial income by Argentine standards. However, up to this point, she had not dated anyone until 2020, with the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Many company employees had to self-isolate at home, including Cecilia. During this time, she found herself with a lot of free time, so she decided to try out a dating app. To her surprise, she discovered many well-off men on the platform, so she decided to upload her picture. Her outstanding appearance quickly caught the attention of many admirers. These men continuously sent messages hoping to arrange a date with her. However, Cecilia had high standards and knew exactly what she wanted in a relationship she wasn't interested in. The men who eagerly approached her, but among them, one man who seemed very successful, caught her attention. Unlike the others, he was polite and spoke with great respect. Cecilia felt that he was like a true gentleman. He shared interesting things with her every day. And after getting to know him, Cecilia learned that his name was Cesar Senna. He was very passionate about fitness and even had his own gym. As time went on, they found they had a lot in common, including a shared love for small animals. After only communicating through their phones, they finally met in person for the first time in December 2021. After their conversation, they were both very pleased with each other and quickly became romantically involved. At this point, Cecilia believed she had found the love of her life. She even introduced Caesar to her mother during their first visit to meet her future mother-in-law. Gloria was delighted to see her daughter had found such a suitable partner at the dinner table. Gloria asked Caesar about his family background. Fortunately, his background was quite impressive as well. Caesar's father, Emerenciano Senna, was a well-known local politician. Caesar's mother, Marcella Acuna, is a very thoughtful woman. Moreover, she is actively involved in various political activities such as advocating for women's rights. On top of that, Marcella is also strict with her son. As you can see, Caesar comes from a very good family background. However, at this point, Gloria's feelings shifted to concern for her daughter. She realized that the social gap between her daughter and Caesar was too great. They came from completely different social classes. After the meal, Gloria called her aside to ask about the situation and offer her advice. She was worried that Caesar's parents might oppose the relationship. However, Cecilia confidently reassured her mother, saying, "As long as we love each other, I believe Caesar and I are meant to be." Despite hearing this, Gloria's concerns didn't subside, but she chose to respect her daughter's decision. But as you might know, Argentina still has significant social class divisions. Therefore, Gloria's worries were not unfounded, returning to the couple relationship in August 2022 during a picnic. Caesar pulled a diamond ring from his pocket, knelt down, and proposed to Cecilia. It was an incredibly emotional moment, and Cecilia had no choice but to accept the proposal. Overjoyed, Cecilia shared a picture of the engagement ring on her social media with the caption, "King of my heart." Just a month later, they were married and began their new life together. However, instead of buying a new home, the young couple chose to live temporarily at Cecilia's aunt's house. This aunt, who had no children and was very close to Cecilia, treated her like her own daughter. Having Caesar and Cecilia living with her brought her great happiness. Everything seemed unusually peaceful until the end of May 2023, when Cecilia's mother-in-law arranged jobs for her and her husband. However, these jobs were located in the far south of Argentina in the city of Ushuaia, approximately 3,700 kilometers from Ristenia, where they currently lived. Cecilia didn't quite understand the situation. She didn't want to be far from her family, and she had no friends in Ushuaia. She told her husband, "I don't want to leave my hometown," but Caesar believed that the jobs his mother had arranged for them were very good, with high salaries several times that of an average worker, making them a dream opportunity for many people. Although it would be far from home, the work was light and offered a lot of free time. Moreover, Caesar's mother had gone to great lengths to secure these positions for them. As a result, Caesar persuaded his wife to reconsider his words. Left Cecilia feeling conflicted. Although the new jobs were not bad, she still didn't want to go seeing her struggle. Caesar said, "If you really don't want to go, we could take a trip to Ushuaia, check out the work environment, and then decide whether to accept the jobs." Caesar hoped to find a solution that would balance his wife's feelings while also taking advantage of the job opportunity, and most importantly, they hadn't gone on a honeymoon since getting married. This would be the perfect chance for them to travel together. At this point, Cecilia was convinced by her husband she really wanted to travel, so she agreed to this plan with this approach. Caesar proved himself to be very thoughtful and considerate. As for Cecilia, she shared her travel plans with her mother and aunt, and both of them agreed on June 1st, 2023 at 2 p.m. Cecilia was packing at her aunt's house. She prepared a black suitcase filled with clothes and daily essentials for both her and her husband. While her aunt was helping her pack, she reminded Cecilia to be cautious and stay safe while traveling far from home. Cecilia smiled and replied, "I'm not a child anymore that day." Strangely, Cecilia's husband wasn't at her aunt's house. He had gone back to his parents' home to discuss their trip at 11 p.m. Caesar returned to Cecilia's aunt's house in a Toyota pickup truck driven by the family's chauffeur. Cecilia's black suitcase was loaded into the truck, but Caesar had very little luggage, just a red backpack. Her aunt was puzzled as to why Caesar was bringing so few belongings when they were going on such a long trip. Caesar explained, "We're going somewhere very far, and along the way I'll stop to rest and shop for this trip." They planned to drive to Corrientes and spend the night there, then fly to Buenos Aires, the capital of Argentina. The next day, the young couple had planned to stay there for a few days, visit famous sites, and then purchase some daily essentials. Once everything was ready, they would board a plane and continue their journey to Ushuaia in southern Argentina. From their itinerary, you can see that they would be traveling from the north to the southernmost part of Argentina, which would surely be an exciting experience for Cecilia. So Cecilia and Caesar said goodbye to her aunt and left the house together. Officially beginning their long journey that night, the truck safely arrived in Corrente and the couple checked into a hotel. Cecilia was excited about the rest of the trip as she had never flown before, and she felt a little nervous. Cecilia texted her friends asking about what it's like to fly and searched online for tips on flying, and those would be her final communications by June 6th. 5 days after the couple had left home, Gloria went to the police station in a state of panic. She reported that her eldest daughter Cecilia was missing and suspected that something had happened to her a few days earlier. Gloria mentioned that Cecilia's cell phone might have been taken over by someone else, and that person was pretending to be Cecilia, sending messages to the family to make it seem like she was still on the trip. This was very strange. Had Cecilia really gone missing? According to Gloria's recollection, on the second day of her daughter's trip at 1:30 p.m. on June 2nd, Cecilia's younger sister received a message from Cecilia. The message read, "I'm about to become a queen." In the following days, Cecilia continued to contact her family, sharing what she saw and heard, even talking about where she would have her wedding and where she might buy a house in the future. Although Cecilia maintained contact with her family, Gloria couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Normally, Cecilia didn't communicate with the family much, but in recent days she had been texting very frequently, which was completely unlike her usual behavior. However, Gloria didn't think too much of it at the time, assuming that maybe her daughter, who hadn't traveled in a while, was just in a good mood and feeling more talkative this time. But 2 days later, in the late hours of June 4th, Gloria was abruptly awakened from a deep sleep by urgent knocking at the door. She quickly put on a coat and rushed to open it. When she did, she found two masked strangers standing before her. They identified themselves as agents and delivered the devastating news. "Your eldest daughter, Cecilia, has been in an accident." Gloria was shocked to hear the news. She couldn't understand why someone would deliver such information in the middle of the night. When she tried to ask for more details, the two agents turned and walked away. Gloria shouted after them, demanding they stop, but the two continued walking quickly without looking back, disappearing into the darkness. Within moments, she couldn't catch up to them after returning home. Gloria was consumed with a terrible sense of unease. She grabbed her phone and tried to message Celia, asking if she was safe. To her surprise, Cecilia responded quickly, despite it being quite late. However, this didn't ease Gloria's growing suspicions. Gloria wanted to video call her daughter, but Cecilia replied, "The camera on my phone is broken, so I can't video call right now." Cecilia added, "I'll send my phone in for repair and contact you later." Not being able to see her daughter's face only deepened Gloria's doubts. She asked Cecilia to send a voice message so she could hear her voice, but a long time passed with no reply. Eventually, Cecilia sent a voice message and Gloria quickly opened it. But the content was strange. It had nothing to do with their conversation. It seemed like the recording had been made a long time ago. Indeed, Cecilia's younger sister confirmed that this was a recording her sister had sent her a long time ago. This only made Gloria more convinced that something had happened to her daughter. After that, the younger sister tried calling Cecilia, but no one answered. She then attempted to call from her mother's phone, but this time Cecilia's phone was turned off. Gloria became increasingly worried and asked her younger daughter to call Caesar, Cecilia's husband. After a long wait, Caesar finally answered the call, but when asked about Cecilia's whereabouts, he hesitated and couldn't give a clear answer. The younger sister asked to speak with Cecilia, but Caesar said, "Your sister isn't here." "I don't know where she went." This response left Gloria stunned. They were supposed to be on their honeymoon together, so how could they not be together? Caesar then explained that after they arrived in Buenos Aires, the two of them had a fight due to some disagreements at that moment. Cecilia told Caesar, "I don't like you at all, and the only reason I'm with you is because of your wealth. I'm telling you now, I've had a new boyfriend for a long time, and I hope you'll stop looking for me after saying this." Cecilia packed her belongings and left. Gloria found this story even harder to believe. She knew that Cecilia was not someone who craved fame or luxury on the phone. Caesar insisted that he wasn't lying and that it was Cecilia who had been dishonest. He claimed that they had actually been separated for a long time, although they still lived together as a couple. The love between them was gone. Caesar ALSO said that Cecilia was very concerned with appearances. On one hand, she didn't want others to know about their situation, but on the other hand, she wanted to maintain the status of being married into a wealthy family. He claimed she was so embarrassed by this that she didn't dare to tell her family, and had asked Caesar to keep it a secret as well. However, no matter what Caesar said, Gloria didn't believe him. She knew her daughter better than anyone. Caesar then stopped talking and hung up over the next 2 days. Gloria and her younger daughter tried various ways to reach Cecilia, but they were unsuccessful. They also called Cecilia's friends, but all of them said they didn't know where she was, with no other options left. Gloria went to the police to file a report. After receiving the information, the police immediately issued a missing person notice. The missing person was Cecilia, 28 years old, 160 centimeters tall, with dark brown hair, last seen on June 1st. At that time, she was wearing gray jeans, a dark gray jacket, and gray sneakers with pink patterns. Regarding Gloria's encounter with the two agents that evening, the police collected footage from surveillance cameras around Gloria's house, but they couldn't identify the two individuals or find any other clues. It seemed that these people had deliberately avoided the camera lenses. According to the investigation, after getting married, Cecilia had left her previous job and started working as a nurse at a local hospital. This job was completely unrelated to her field of study, but it was arranged by her mother-in-law. Marcel felt that Cecilia's previous job paid too little and had no prospects for growth. Although Cecilia didn't like the new job, she couldn't refuse it. In fact, the hospital where she worked was one that her in-laws had invested in, and arranging a job for Cecilia was just the beginning for others. This would undoubtedly be seen as a great opportunity. However, Cecilia didn't enjoy the work at all. She had no interest in working at the hospital. What she found unbearable was that most of the hospital staff were acquainted with her in-laws, making her feel constantly monitored and uncomfortable. She began to complain to her husband, telling him, "I want to quit working at the hospital. I really don't like it," but her husband didn't understand her feelings, thinking that she was just not yet accustomed to the new job. A few days later, Cecilia finally submitted her resignation at the hospital. Caesar didn't say anything when he found out to him his wife. Quitting her job wasn't a big deal. Caesar didn't lack money, even if he didn't earn anything. His parents would still send him a monthly allowance. After quitting, Cecilia decided to look for a job she truly enjoyed, but after submitting applications for several days, she still hadn't received any responses. This made her feel discouraged. It was around this time that Cecilia realized her period was late, and she started experiencing a loss of appetite and frequent nausea. She suspected she might be pregnant and immediately shared. The Caesar both were overjoyed, and Caesar, being thoughtful, suggested that Cecilia should stop working altogether and stay home to focus on the pregnancy. Shortly after receiving the news, Cecilia's in-laws immediately sent various nutritional supplements. However, what no one expected was that Cecilia's pregnancy was a false alarm. The doctor explained that the symptoms she was experiencing, which resembled pregnancy, were likely due to the significant stress she had been under recently. At that moment, everything felt like a burst bub for her. Cecilia broke down crying in Caesar's arms to comfort her. Caesar came up with an idea, since they both loved small animals. Why not start a pet cafe together? He believed that this new type of establishment would surely succeed. Cecilia was instantly excited by the idea, and they quickly set the plan in motion. Cecilia handled all the preparations while Caesar covered the expenses. By the end of 2022, their cafe officially opened. The cafe was decorated in a very modern style, and they allowed customers to bring their pets to dine with them. After opening, the cafe attracted many young customers who brought their beloved pets to enjoy the experience. Business gradually picked up, and Cecilia was busy every day, but still felt very happy. Caesar would sometimes come to the cafe to pick her up after work, and that was all she needed. However, the joy didn't last long. Once the novelty wore off, the number of customers began to decline and their startups started losing money. Continuing the business only led to further losses. Finally, in March 2023, their pet cafe declared bankruptcy and was successfully sold. Cecilia managed the proceeds from the sale and used the money to buy herself a bicycle. Encouraged by her husband, Cecilia decided to open a fitness club. Perhaps due to the influence of her in-laws, many people were eager to invest in the fitness club, but Cecilia declined all offers. She withdrew all her savings, combined them with the money earned from the pet cafe business, and successfully established the new fitness club. However, her mother-in-law Marcella seemed displeased with this and arranged for Cecilia and her husband to work. In Ushuaia, Cecilia felt she couldn't refuse, so on June 1st, the couple set off for Ushuaia. This eventually led to Cecilia's disappearance, returning to the police investigation 2 days after the missing person alert was issued. The police still hadn't received any leads given the current situation. The police agreed that this was not a simple missing person case. They then summoned Cecilia's husband Caesar to the police station to assist with the investigation. He was the last person to see Cecilia before she disappeared, but Caesar didn't come alone. He was accompanied by his mother and their lawyer. It seemed that Caesar's family had prepared for this situation. Once the news spread, the case involving a politician's family quickly attracted media attention. A crowd of reporters gathered and surrounded the police station before entering the station for questioning. Caesar and his mother were interviewed outside. The reporters asked many questions, but most were answered by Marcella. His mother, surprisingly. She told the reporters that she didn't recognize Cecilia as her daughter-in-law, stating that she was just a friend. Caesar met online. She added that her son Caesar was only 19 years old, while Cecilia was 28, making them entirely incompatible and unable to be married. Marcella also claimed that Cecilia was a vain woman who seduced her son. Additionally, she accused Cecilia of pretending to be pregnant in order to deceive them and secure a marriage license. Therefore, she suggested that this disappearance could be part of a deliberate plot when a reporter asked Caesar if he was the last person to see Cecilia. Marcella quickly interjected before he could answer. She confirmed that her son was indeed the last person to see Cecilia, but added that he wasn't the only one she had seen her as well. Marcella explained that she had traveled to Buenos for work and witnessed her son arguing with Cecilia. During the argument, Cecilia reportedly hit and kicked her son. Marcel added that Cecilia was a rude woman who, after the fight, took her luggage and left on her own. Afterwards, Caesar accompanied her to an event and they didn't have any further contact with Cecilia. As for why Cecilia went missing, Marcella claimed ignorance. She speculated that this could be a planned scheme, considering that Caesar's father was due to participate in a primary election for a parliamentary seat in 10 days. Given the critical timing, she suggested that someone might be deliberately trying to harm their family. Marcella went on to say that she herself was planning to run for mayor in the near future and suggested that this was undoubtedly a dirty trick by her opponents. Marcella's statements caused a major stir. This was no longer just a simple missing person case. It had escalated into a political conflict. More and more people were becoming interested in the case. On the same day, a group of Caesar's father's supporters gathered outside the police station, attempting to prevent reporters from taking photos whenever someone pulled out a camera. The supporters would snatch it away and threaten to delete the footage. Some even physically attacked the reporters. The police had to step in to maintain order, but they too were met with aggression. Many people were injured, and the situation at the scene became extremely chaotic. Supporters of Caesar's father even took to the streets in protest, claiming to defend the family's rights and declaring themselves as victims. Some reporters found Gloria the mother of the missing woman, and she told the press that she wasn't interested in the political issues. Her only concern was finding her missing daughter. However, she also believed that Caesar had taken her daughter away and that her disappearance was definitely connected to him. The police conducted an interrogation with Caesar, but he claimed that after the argument with Cecilia, he lost contact with her and had no knowledge of her whereabouts. The police then interviewed Cecilia's aunt about her daily life. The aunt described Cecilia as a very resilient person with a strong sense of self-respect, completely different from how Caesar's family portrayed her since getting married. Cecilia and Caesar had moved into the aunt's home. Cecilia was very tidy and always cared deeply about her husband's well-being. In contrast, Caesar was extremely lazy. He didn't care about cleanliness and even disliked bathing, only doing so when Cecilia reminded him. However, Cecilia never complained. Even when she was busy with work, she made an effort to cook for the family. Caesar was very picky about his food, and Cecilia would always change the dishes to suit his tastes. The aunt added, "I advised Cecilia to ask Caesar to share some of the household chores, but she didn't seem to mind. She felt that cooking every day for the person she loved was a source of happiness." The aunt also mentioned that Cecilia deeply loved her husband and sacrificed a lot for him. However, Caesar's mother instantly refused to accept her as a daughter-in-law after the marriage. Marcella frequently called Caesar, urging him to return home, and even sent the family driver to pick him up each time this happened. Cecilia felt deeply saddened, unsure of what she could do to win her mother-in-law's approval. Cecilia's aunt also revealed that her niece registered her marriage with Caesar on September 16th of last year. At that time, Caesar's social media profile listed his age as 25, but in reality he was only 18 years old in Argentina. The legal marriage age for both men and women is 18. Due to the pandemic, the young couple decided to register their marriage first and hold the wedding ceremony at a later date on the day of the marriage registration. Cecilia wore a constant smile of happiness. Her family and friends gathered to celebrate the young couple, but none of the groom's family members attended. Not even Caesar's parents. Marriage is a significant event in one's life, and Caesar is their only son. Yet his parents didn't attend or even call to congratulate them, which puzzled many people. People began questioning Caesar about this, causing him to appear slightly embarrassed. At that moment, Cecilia quickly stood up to explain that Caesar's parents were attending a very important event at the time and had actually congratulated them earlier with that the subject was dropped. If what Cecilia's aunt said is true, it's clear that Caesar's parents were never pleased with Cecilia from the start. This strongly suggests that Caesar's family may be directly connected to Cecilia's case. The next day, Cecilia's mother and aunt went to the police station for the second time, bringing new information to the authorities. They also brought along Cecilia's friend, known only as a whose name has not been disclosed, to testify. Revealed that Cecilia had confided in her that Caesar had a violent streak in May of this year. After an argument between Cecilia and Caesar, he physically assaulted her and even choked her. He threatened that if she ever displeased him, he would kill her entire family. Cecilia was terrified, so she confided in him. But he didn't know what to do in this situation. Following this revelation, some internet users thoroughly searched Caesar's social media accounts and discovered that on June 6th, Caesar did indeed attend an event with his mother. During the event, Caesar appeared very lively and smiled frequently. He posted several photos from the event on social media. In one of the photos, someone noticed scratch marks on Caesar's neck. Subsequently, a person known as B, who chose to remain anonymous, informed the police that he had seen Cecilia standing in front of Caesar's family home on June 2nd. This directly contradicted what Cecilia had previously said, that on June 2nd they were preparing to board a plane in Buenos Aires. So why did Cecilia appear in front of her in-laws' home based on B's testimony? The police conducted a search of Caesar's home at the time. Only Caesar's ameno Senyo was present. He seemed slightly confused by the sudden arrival of the police, but invited the men to search the house freely. Appearing very confident, the police search lasted several hours, during which they thoroughly examined Caesar's house inside and out. They discovered something unusual on a mattress. In a small room, the mattress had several yellowish stains, and after testing with luminol, the stains glowed, indicating that they were blood. Additionally, the police found a burned wallet and several prohibited weapons in the house. Moreover, a large sum of money was discovered in Emenciano's bedroom. When questioned about the source of the money, Emiliano gave vague answers. The police then arrested him. DNA testing later confirmed that the bloodstains on the mattress belonged to Cecilia, the missing person. As a result, Marcella was summoned by the police and became a suspect in the case. Meanwhile, Caesar's whereabouts remained unknown. The police immediately issued a nationwide arrest warrant for Caesar on June 11th. Caesar voluntarily turned himself in after arresting the entire family. The police interrogated them about Cecilia's current whereabouts. Despite the intense questioning, all three remained silent and refused to say a word. The police then investigated and questioned Caesar's neighbors to see if they had noticed anything unusual. Before or after Cecilia's disappearance, one woman told the police that on June 5th, Emerenciano had asked her if she needed a mattress, but she declined. The police also reviewed surveillance footage from the cameras outside Caesar's home and neighboring houses. After thoroughly examining the footage, they discovered that around 10 p.m. on June 1st, Caesar and the family's private driver left the house to pick up Cecilia. According to their previous plan, they were supposed to reach Carantes that night and then fly to Buenos Aires the next day. However, the surveillance footage showed that on the morning of June 2nd, they returned to Caesar's home. The footage also captured Cecilia standing at the door, which matched the earlier testimony given by Caesar's family at around 10:30 a.m. Caesar left the house alone and returned an hour later at 10:02 p.m. Caesar left the house again, this time carrying a black plastic bag. The police noted that Caesar had 3 scratch marks on his neck as he exited the house for hours later at 5 p.m. The family's driver and Caesar's mother returned home at 5:12 p.m. The driver left on a motorcycle by himself. Later that evening, the driver returned to Caesar's home in a Toyota pickup truck, went inside briefly, and then drove away at 7:27 p.m. The police suspect that during this time, Cecilia was murdered and that the Toyota pickup truck was used to transport her body for disposal at 9 p.m. Caesar and his parents left their home. Surveillance footage from that night showed them driving to another property owned by Emerenciano. Located on the outskirts of the city on June 12th, the police conducted a search of this suburban property, and upon arrival, they discovered that a married couple was living there. This couple was responsible for taking care of the property. The police questioned them about the Caesar family's visit on the night of June 2nd, asking what they were doing there. So late, the couple claimed that the family stayed only briefly and then left, insisting that nothing unusual happened. Let's pause here for a moment. Clearly, the couple wasn't being truthful. It's highly unlikely that the entire family would drive out to a remote property in the middle of the night just to chat for a bit and then leave. Moreover, these two were merely employees of the Caesar family, so it's doubtful there was anything of great importance between them. Therefore, the police immediately began a thorough search in an abandoned pigsty at the back of the property. They found signs of burning among the ashes. They discovered a small bone fragment after laboratory analysis. It was determined to be a human bone, but it was too badly burned to extract DNA. At the end of June, the police conducted another search in a residential area named after Emerenciano. This was because a new asphalt road had been laid in this area shortly after Cecilia's disappearance. The police suspected that part of her remains might have been buried beneath the asphalt. They brought in professional construction workers to dig up the road. But aside from sand and rocks, no human remains were found. The police then conducted a thorough search of the residential area, and from a nearby riverbed they retrieved a burned-out travel trip trunk, reduced to just its frame in the same area. They also found a ring, a pair of earrings, a pendant, and a human finger bone. After Cecilia's mother identified them, it was confirmed that these items belonged to her daughter. With this evidence in hand, the police arrested the family's driver, Caesar's mother, and the couple who looked after the suburban property. During the police investigation, the driver was the first to be interrogated. He revealed that on June 2nd, Caesar suddenly told him there was no need to go to the airport. They got out of the car midway, and the driver didn't know where the two went. Later that afternoon, Caesar called him back. When the driver entered the house, he found Cecilia lying motionless on the floor, no longer breathing immediately. Marcella instructed the driver and his wife to help clean up the scene. At first, the driver didn't want to comply, knowing it was illegal, but Marcella reassured him, saying that he shouldn't worry because she would take full responsibility if anything happened. Additionally, she promised the driver a generous reward. Tempted by the money, he and his family agreed to go along with the plan. The couple who looked after the suburban property also confessed they admitted that on the night of June 2nd, Cecilia, already lifeless, was gagged and brought to the suburban house. They didn't know what had happened, only that Marcella disliked her daughter-in-law. They heard that Marcella didn't want to pass on the family's wealth to the daughter-in-law and only wanted to leave it to her son when they saw Cecilia being dragged out of the car. They were terrified, however. Marcella threatened them and ordered them to keep quiet, warning that they would lose their jobs if they didn't comply. At the time, the couple had no other place to go, so they were very afraid. Afterward, Marcella's family burned Cecilia's body in the piggy behind the house. The couple who looked after the property didn't participate in this process. They were too terrified, faced with such overwhelming evidence. Marcella finally confessed her guilt to the police. However, she claimed that Cecilia was the victim of her own plot and insisted that neither her husband nor her son were involved. Marcella admitted that she never liked Cecilia as a daughter-in-law. Cecilia was much older than her son, and the family couldn't accept someone of her background. Marcella felt that Cecilia had taken her son's love away from her and was too selfish to let him return home. She also said that she had long reached a point where she couldn't stand Cecilia anymore, which is why she wanted her to disappear. However, the police didn't believe Marcella's testimony, suspecting that she was trying to protect her son. In the end, the family couldn't withstand the pressure, and Caesar confessed to murdering Cecilia. He stated, "I love my wife very much, but my mother always thought she wasn't good enough under my mother's influence. I gradually came to believe that Cecilia was only with me because of her greed for the family's wealth." In reality, the couple's marriage had been strained from the beginning. Even though they had married in 1850 September 2022, they were already considering divorce. But Cecilia kept this a secret from her family. It was unclear why she felt the need to hide it under his mother's influence. Caesar eventually harbored malicious intentions and ultimately acted against his wife. Additionally, Emiliano also admitted to being involved in the crime. There are rumors that the two agents who appeared at Gloria's house on the night of June 4th might have been members of a faction opposing Emil Lanciano. It's believed that they were monitoring the family and happened to witness the crime. However, for reasons unknown, they didn't report it to the police, but instead assumed false identities to inform the victim's mother in the aftermath of the crime. Gloria was heartbroken over the loss of her daughter, and many people mourned Cecilia in July 2023. A spontaneous protest was organized, demanding justice for Cecilia and her family. Cecilia's mother revealed to the media that after her daughter's tragic death, she received a threatening message stating, "If you do anything, your other daughter will face the same fate." Cecilia's aunt also received similar threats, and their family experienced power outages and internet disruptions. Despite these pressures, they remained determined to seek justice for Cecilia regardless of the sinister forces at the time. Emino was still a significant local figure, and despite the crime, he retained considerable support from the community. He was also a close friend of the current governor of Chaco province. As of now, the truth about the case has been uncovered, but it has not yet gone to trial. The trial is expected to begin in early 2024, and it's possible that more details will emerge during this process. However, as of now, no new information has been released from the ongoing investigation. We'll have to wait and see what sentences will be handed down to Cesar Sena's family. That brings us to the conclusion of today's story. Although the perpetrators have not yet been sentenced, this case leaves us with valuable lessons. Cecilia and Cesar Sena could have had a beautiful ending. If Marcella had respected her son's choices, things wouldn't have escalated if Cesar had stood firm and distinguished right from wrong. Unfortunately, Cecilia, the tragic victim, didn't protect herself and clung to something that wasn't truly hers. Story 4. Have you ever wondered what life is really like? Behind the walls of an ordinary home, sometimes the smiles and family photos might be hiding painful tears. Promises of love can turn into shackles that imprison, and hands that once caressed lovingly can become weapons that inflict harm. A house that seems ordinary from the outside but hides a silent tragedy within. On October 28, 2007, just 3 days before Halloween, the town of Bolingbrook was bustling with preparations for the holiday. Stacy and Kales was no exception. That day, Stacy planned to visit a friend's house to help with painting at just 23 years old. Stacy was already a mother of 4. The 2 oldest children were from her husband's previous marriage. while the two younger ones were hers. With her husband after they got married, Stacy married at the age of 19, while her husband Drew Walter Peterson was a middle-aged man of 49. He was a well-known local police officer who had even been honored as Officer of the Year. Despite the significant age difference, Stacy deeply loved her husband. In the beginning, she was even willing to be his mistress because she believed Drew was charming, successful, and a good father after they got married. Stacy devoted herself entirely to caring for their family. Daily tasks like cooking, cleaning, and looking after 4 children were never an issue for her. After all, living in a big house with a husband who had a stable job and some savings was the life Stacy had always dreamed of. She believed that her marriage would certainly be a happy one. Stacy had a great relationship with everyone in town. She was always eager to help her friends. According to her usual routine, she should have arrived at her friend's house early today to help with the painting, but when her friend hadn't seen Stacy by 10 a.m., she decided to call her. It turned out that Stacy had slept in a bit and said she would be there soon. However, by the afternoon, Stacy still hadn't shown up. The friend who also knew Stacy's younger sister, Cassandra Kays, decided to tell her about the situation. Cassandra, just a year younger than her sister, was very close to Stacy. When she found out that she couldn't reach Stacy, she became extremely worried. Just the night before, during a conversation between the sisters, Stacy had made a cryptic remark, "If anything happens to me, remember it wasn't an accident, it was definitely caused by your brother-in-law." In fact, this wasn't the first time Stacy had said something like that recently. She had been confiding in friends and family that her husband was a very frightening man, and she feared he might kill her at any time since their marriage. In 2003, the past 4 years had been enough for Stacy to see her husband's true nature. The sweet love she once felt had faded away, replaced by harsh words, tight control, and worst of all, violence. Her husband would drive by to check on her, or constantly call her to know what she was doing and where she was going. If she went grocery shopping, he would inspect the receipts, and if she went for a haircut, he might call her 8 times. Stacy's once beautiful dreams had completely shattered. Now her only hope was to escape from this man as soon as possible. So when Cassandra learned that her sister had broken a promise to a friend without explanation, she grew even more concerned, unable to reach Stacy on her cell phone. She called Stacy's home directly. One of Stacy's children answered and said their mother had gone to visit their grandfather. Cassandra immediately called her father, but he told her that Stacy had not visited him at all by 11 p.m. Cassandra still hadn't been able to contact Stacy, so she decided to drive to her sister's house to check on things. But when she arrived, only the 4 children were home. Both her brother-in-law and sister were nowhere to be found. Their 2 cars were also gone. Cassandra knew something was wrong because her sister loved her kids deeply and would never leave them alone late at night like this. When she asked the children, Cassandra learned that her sister and brother-in-law had a big argument. Earlier that morning afterwards, Stacy stormed out and Drew immediately followed her to find her concerned. Cassandra called Drew, but before she could ask anything, he yelled, "Where's your sister? I've been looking for her all day," without waiting for him to finish. Cassandra anxiously asked, "So what's going on? Where are you?" "I'm at home," Drew replied. Hearing this, Cassandra began to sweat and felt a wave of fear. She had just left her sister's house, and over the phone she clearly heard Drew inserting the key and starting his car. It was obvious Drew was lying and he was definitely hiding something. So at 1 a.m., Cassandra went to the police station to report her sister missing at 2:30 a.m. On her way back, she drove her past her sister's house and noticed that the 2 cars were back. Could it be that her sister had returned? She called Drew once again. This time, Drew said, "Your sister called me at 9 p.m. last night saying she was driving to the airport to run away with another man. She took her passport, left the car at the airport, and told me to pick it up. I just got back." Cassandra felt something was off. He claimed he had just returned, but the airport was only about a half-hour drive from her sister's house. So how could it take him until 2:30 a.m. to get home? Moreover, Stacy loved her children dearly. Whether they were her biological kids or stepchildren, she treated them all as her own. This was a well-known fact among the neighbors, so why would she abandon her 4 children when all these clues were put together? It became clear that Drew was highly suspicious since he was a local police officer. The local police station, wanting to avoid a conflict of interest, handed Stacy's missing person case over to the Illinois State Police for investigation on the afternoon of October the 29th, 2007. The Illinois State Police arrived at Drew's house to investigate Stacy's disappearance, surprisingly despite being a police officer himself. Drew refused to cooperate and insisted that Stacy had run away with another man. He also refused to allow the police to search Stacy's car. This behavior aroused significant suspicion among the Illinois State Police. Left with no other option, they had to return to obtain a search warrant from higher authorities. 2 days later, the police returned with a search warrant and thoroughly searched every corner of Drew's house, but they did not find any critical evidence. Meanwhile, Stacy's family and friends quickly organized a group of volunteers to help search for her in 2 days. Over 75 volunteers scoured wetlands, parks, and rivers, distributing hundreds of flyers. Unfortunately, no clues about Stacy's whereabouts were found during this time. Drew acted as if nothing had happened. He continued to insist that Stacy had run off with another man and saw no reason to search for her. The police learned from Stacy's friends that she had recently been desperate to escape from her husband. One friend revealed that just 3 days before she disappeared on October 25th, Stacy had called to ask about renting a house and expressed her desire to get away from the dangerous situation at home. Cassandra's younger sister also mentioned that on October 27th, when she arrived at her sister's house for dinner, her brother-in-law seemed happy. It wasn't until he left for work that her sister made that cryptic comment. At this point, the police could only focus on investigating Drew, hoping to uncover something from him. Drew Walter Peterson, born in 1954, was 53 years old when Stacy disappeared. Before that, he had served in the military and officially became a member of the Bolingbrook Police Department in 1977. A month after Stacy's disappearance at the age of 53, he retired with an annual pension of $79,000, which was enough for him to live comfortably in his younger years. Drew was assigned to a task force and later served as an undercover agent in drug gangs. Since the 1960s, the drug problem in the United States had become increasingly severe, with convenient transportation in a thriving city. Chicago had become one of the largest drug trafficking hubs in the country. In that context, an outstanding undercover agent had many opportunities for advancement and wealth. Drew was fortunate to be selected. He grew his hair long, maintained a thick beard, and dressed casually. Blending imperfectly with Chicago's drug dealers, he quickly adapted to the environment and made friends with locals. Gathering valuable information in 1979, he was honored as the Police Officer of the Year. Despite having a successful career, Drew's personal life was marred by reprehensible behavior. When Drew met Stacy, he had not yet divorced his previous wife. At that time, Stacy was still underage. A 46-year-old man involved with a 16-year-old girl was clearly illegal. However, because it was a small town where everyone knew each other, and Drew was a police officer, although people were aware of the situation, no one reported him on. October 18, 2003, just 8 days after his divorce from his previous wife. Drew married Stacy after their marriage. Drew exercised strict control over Stacy even when she went shopping with female friends. He would ask her detailed questions. He installed surveillance cameras in the house, placed a tracking device on Stacy's phone, and even pressured her into getting cosmetic surgery when they had heated arguments. Drew would sometimes physically assault Stacy. At this point, Stacy finally realized that she couldn't continue in this marriage. She sought out a lawyer and began preparing for a divorce. She had scheduled a meeting with her lawyer on October 29th, but she mysteriously disappeared on the 28th. Furthermore, when the police investigated Drew, they discovered that beneath his flashy exterior lay many dark secrets. It's highly likely that he was also connected to another murder case. Drew had been through 4 marriages. Kathleen Savia was his 3rd wife. She met Drew when she was 30 years old, and at that time, Drew was still married to his 2nd wife. They were married for 10 years and had 2 sons together. Drew had abused Kathleen several times, but she endured it for the sake of their children. However, when she learned that Drew was involved with Stacy, she could no longer tolerate it and decided to file for divorce. Divorce meant dividing assets among Drew's assets. He could accept losing other things, but not his pension. The two constantly argued about the division of assets. Drew often threatened Kathleen, saying, "Don't push me. Don't make me make you disappear." Between 2002 and 2004, Kathleen reported Drew's abuse to the police 18 times. Strangely, he was never punished or investigated. In March 2002, Kathleen felt her life was in danger and sought an emergency protection order from the police. However, due to Drew's lawyer's interference, she was forced to drop it by July. Kathleen once again reached out to the police, stating that Drew was no longer just threatening her with words. He had brought a knife to her home. The police filed a report with the county prosecutor's office, but ultimately nothing came of it. In November, Kathleen wrote a desperate letter to the assistant county prosecutor. In the letter, she wrote, "He knows how to manipulate this system. His next move will be to either take my children or eliminate me. I am not getting any help from the Bolingbrook police. I truly need your assistance now." Despite the sincerity of her letter, she received no response. Fortunately, on October 10, 2003, Kathleen finally divorced Drew. However, the issue of asset division remained unresolved. According to the plan, the asset division hearing was scheduled for April 2004. If everything went as expected, Kathleen would receive the house child support, alimony, a portion of Drew's pension, and a share of the profits from the sale of his bar. But a month before the hearing on March 1st, Kathleen was found dead in her bathtub at home. At the time, her cause of death was ruled as an accidental drowning, considering that both Drew's first and second wives had also accused him of abuse. It indicated a pattern of repeat offenses. Prosecutor James Glasgow believed there were many suspicious circumstances surrounding Kathleen's death. Glasgow, AW County prosecutor with 26 years of legal experience and a strong track record in combating domestic violence, was the prosecutor in charge of Stacy's disappearance case. Prosecutor James wanted to review Drew's records to see if this police officer, protected by a network of local connections, was hiding any secrets. His investigation revealed that the death of Drew's ex-wife Kathleen was indeed connected to him. First, the timing was too coincidental, exactly 1 month before the asset division hearing. Moreover, the coroner's report at the time indicated that the injuries on Kathleen's body were not consistent with an accidental drowning. In fact, Kathleen's family had also been suspicious of her death. How could a healthy woman in her 40s who wasn't an alcoholic or a drug user suddenly slip and fall in the bathtub? This was a small oval-shaped bathtub where you couldn't even stretch out your legs. How could someone drown in it? However, the family's suspicions were ignored and the case was closed. Prosecutor James decided to search for Stacy while also reopening Kathleen's case. The first step was to conduct a new forensic examination of her body. People often say that exhuming a body disturbs the deceased, but when Kathleen's family learned of it, they fully supported the decision on November 13th. Kathleen's body was exhumed and re-examined by forensic experts. Her family was concerned about potential interference in the investigation, so with the court's permission, they funded an additional expert to participate in the examination. This time, the forensic experts discovered something suspicious besides the bruises on her body. Kathleen had a large, unexplained wound on her head. Clearly, this couldn't be explained by an accidental drowning. It appeared to be the result of a heavy blow. Finally, the forensic experts and authorities reached a unanimous conclusion. Kathleen's death was a meticulously planned murder. When this conclusion was announced, it caused a significant public outcry as it completely contradicted the accidental death ruling from 3 years earlier. According to the records from that time, Drew had stated on Friday, February 27, 2004, "I picked up my 2 kids to spend the weekend with them on Sunday evening. I brought the kids back to Kathleen's house, but the door was locked and no one answered the phone, so I had to take the kids back home by March. First, I had called Kathleen dozens of times, but she still didn't answer that. Evening, I went to her house again, but no one opened the door. I thought something might have happened, so I called a locksmith to open the door and also gathered 4 neighbors. Once the door was opened, I let the neighbors go upstairs to check on Kathleen while I waited downstairs because Kathleen had told me she didn't want to see me. Shortly after I heard a horrifying scream, I rushed upstairs, and when I reached the bathroom, I saw the neighbors standing in front of the bathtub with terrified expressions. Kathleen was lying in the water-filled tub, her wet hair covering her face. The blood in the bathtub had dried and coagulated. I checked her pulse and it was no longer beating. I was extremely saddened and had no idea how to break the news to our children at that time to avoid any conflict of interest. The local police transferred the case to the Illinois State Police. The state police arrived quickly at the scene. However, they conducted only a cursory examination of the house and didn't even secure the scene. After just over 2 hours, they completed their work and left. Kathleen's family received the tragic news that evening and rushed to the scene only to be stopped by Drew. It wasn't until March 2nd that they were allowed into Kathleen's house. By then it was too late. The police had already left, and Drew was cleaning the bloodstains from the bathtub, claiming he was doing so to prevent their children from seeing it and becoming frightened despite the many suspicious circumstances surrounding Kathleen's death. The jury unanimously concluded that it was an accidental drowning. At that time, one of the jurors knew Drew personally. Although this person hadn't been to the scene, they kept praising Drew as a good cop who couldn't possibly harm his wife. Most importantly, Stacy provided Drew with an alibi. As a result, the jury took less than an hour to confirm that Kathleen had died from an accidental drowning after Kathleen's death. Drew, as the beneficiary, received $1 million from her life insurance policy. He also presented a will that they had previously signed, which stated that after Kathleen's death, Drew would inherit all of her assets just over a month after Kathleen's passing. Drew quickly sold her house. Looking back at Kathleen's case, the process of concluding that she had drowned accidentally was clearly too hasty. Another critical point that was overlooked was that the first coroner to arrive at the scene was a colleague of Drew's. Considering all these clues, Drew became the prime suspect in both cases. The police then proceeded to prosecute him regarding the motive. Drew and Kathleen had deep conflicts of interest. If Kathleen were alive, Drew would stand to lose a significant portion of his assets. On the other hand, her death meant that he inherited a large sum from her. Analyzing Drew's behavior during the incident, his first reaction upon being unable to contact his ex-wife wasn't to reach out to his fellow officers, but to call a locksmith and neighbors instead. Although he appeared anxious after entering the house, he didn't participate in the search, almost as if he was deliberately waiting in for the neighbors to find Kathleen first. Furthermore, as a police officer, Drew destroyed the crime scene the very next day by cleaning the bathtub. These actions were all very strange and aligned with the behavior of someone who had staged the scene of a murder. Regarding Drew's character, he had a habit of smearing others to assert that his own actions were justified. For instance, he once claimed that the reason the mayor and the police chief ignored Kathleen's pleas for help was because she had harassed them at a party. Drew also frequently told others that Stacy was involved with 4 or 5 men at the same time. He consistently created rumors to protect himself. At this point, the only thing missing to convict Drew was a decisive piece of evidence. However, Kathleen had been dead for over 3 years. The house where the incident occurred had been sold, and Stacy's disappearance was repeatedly insisted by Drew to be her running off with another man. Clearly, uncovering evidence against this cunning police officer was not going to be easy. Meanwhile, Drew seemed remarkably calm. During the investigation, he continued to pursue new romantic relationships and was often seen embracing women at bars. He even made an appearance on the popular TV show Larry King Lived by December 2008. Drew announced that he was engaged to a 23-year-old woman. However, due to strong opposition from her father, they broke up. But many other women continued to approach Drew. Fortunately, as the investigation progressed, the emergence of several key witnesses began to expose Drew's true nature. Both the pastor and the divorce lawyer whom Stacy had spoken to contacted the police. They both revealed that before she disappeared, Stacy had confided in them, saying that she had helped Drew create a fake alibi. In Kathleen's case, on that particular day, she saw Drew dressed in black, carrying a black bag, and returning home in the early hours of the morning. The bag contained some women's clothing. The first thing Drew did upon returning home was to put his clothes and the women's clothing into the washing machine. He then instructed Stacy on how to provide an alibi for him to the police. The pastor and the lawyer didn't know each other yet. Their testimonies matched perfectly and were highly credible. Stacy's statements could be considered extremely crucial evidence. In this case, if she could be found and brought to court to testify, it would be difficult for Drew to escape conviction. The problem, however, is that Stacy has gone missing and there is no information on her whereabouts next. Drew's half-brother Thomas Morphy also came forward. To testify, he stated that on the day Stacy disappeared, Drew took him to a coffee shop. After chatting for a while, Drew mentioned that Stacy had a lover and that he was going to take care of her later. Drew asked Thomas to help him carry a large blue 280-liter container from the bedroom to the car. After hearing about Stacy's disappearance, Thomas recalled the heavy feeling he had while carrying the container, describing it as if he were lifting a stone. He suspected that Sty was inside the container, feeling as though he had become an accomplice and struggling with depression. Thomas couldn't cope with the reality and attempted to overdose on pills. Fortunately, he was taken to the hospital in time and survived during the investigation. The police confirmed that such a blue container did exist. However, both the container and Stacy remained missing. Additionally, a man named Jeff testified that Drew once offered him $25,000 to kill Kathleen with these numerous leads. It seemed likely that something terrible had happened to Stacy without her testimony in court. It would be difficult to convict Drew with no other options. Prosecutor James sought a new approach. He pushed for the state of Illinois to pass a law designed specifically for Drew. This law would allow the court to consider the testimony of a witness who cannot be present, provided that the prosecutor could prove the witness was killed to prevent them from testifying, and that their statements were credible. In this case, the testimony Stacy gave before her disappearance and other evidence pointing to Drew were considered credible. This meant that even with Stacy missing, the police could still convict Drew on September 6, 2012. The Illinois Court of Appeals ruled that Drew was guilty of murdering Kathleen, and he was sentenced to 38 years in prison. However, Drew was not satisfied with the verdict. Even after being imprisoned, he continued to appeal, but all of his appeals were subsequently denied. In 2015, Drew attempted to hire a hitman from within the prison to kill Prosecutor James. Unbeknownst to him, a fellow inmate immediately reported the plot using a wiretap. The police recorded a conversation between Drew and his inmate, which became solid evidence against him on July 29, 2016. Drew was sentenced to an additional 40 years in prison for the murder-for-hire plot, despite having no hope left. Drew still denied killing Kathleen. Even as late as 2021, he continued to appeal and accused Prosecutor James of witness intimidation. However, since he failed to provide any evidence, both his appeal and accusations were dismissed as for Stacy. Despite years of searching, there has been no news about her. Coincidentally, her mother, Christine, also mysteriously disappeared on March 11, 1998, while on her way to church, and she too was never found, leaving the case unresolved. Although the hope that Stacy is still alive is very slim, her family has never given up. Her sister, Cassandra, created a website to encourage people to donate. The funds raised have been used to purchase equipment such as ground-penetrating radar, hire search and recovery experts, and more. She has spent over $400,000 on these efforts, even though Drew was investigated for Stacy's disappearance and Kathleen's case. He was only convicted for Kathleen's murder. Therefore, in the end, no one has been held accountable for Stacy's disappearance, not even Drew, who seems to have been regarded as the crime suspect. Cassandra feels deeply disappointed by this. She said, "Now I just want to bring my sister home so I can have peace of mind." As for Stacy's ultimate fate, we can only wait for time to reveal the truth. Story 5 in Osaka, located in the Kanai region of Japan, while the Kanto region represents modern economic power. Kanai is famous for its rich history. Osaka is the third largest city in Japan, known for its unique food culture and bustling commercial districts. The city features historic buildings, Osaka Castle, modern skyscrapers, a TV tower, and popular shopping and dining areas like Shinsaibashi, Donbore, and various gourmet streets offering a diverse array of delicious foods. Osaka is a vibrant city that attracts many tourists. With the rise of tourism, many locals rent out their vacant homes for short-term stays, offering guests homemade meals and other services. Numerous B&B's bed and breakfasts have sprung up compared to traditional hotels. These B&Bs are more affordable, allowing visitors to fully experience local culture. B&B stands for bed and breakfast, which refers to small budget-friendly accommodations that provide an overnight stay and breakfast. Most B&B owners operate family-run businesses in Osaka. Many locals have developed personalized B&Bs based on various themes such as hot springs, Japanese cuisine, and other local specialties. However, among the many B&Bs, there are also black B&Bs where guests don't need to show identification to check in. These black B&Bs are less formal with basic facilities and environments, but their relatively low prices make them popular with certain groups. The main character of the story is Saki Kondo. She was born in Hedi City, Hyogo Prefecture. Saki worked as a saleswoman at a parts manufacturing company in Maa City, Hyogo Prefecture, northwest of Osaka in 2018. After a day of work, Saki left the office as usual. She said goodbye to her colleagues, packed her belongings, and left the company. That evening after work, she took a train straight to Osaka upon arriving. She walked hand in hand with a man, and they headed in a certain direction before disappearing into the night. On Saturday, February 17, 2018, the Hgo Profil police received a call from a woman reporting that her daughter, Saki Kondo, had been missing for 2 days. Saki was known for her dedication to her job. When she failed to show up for work the previous day without requesting leave, and her supervisor was unable to reach her. They contacted her mother to check on her. Saki's mother, who lived in their hometown in Hyogo Prefecture, stayed in close contact with her daughter every day after receiving the call from Saki's colleague. She became very worried. She immediately tried calling Saki's cell phone but couldn't get through after waiting another day without hearing back. She grew increasingly anxious and felt something was wrong, so she decided to contact the police upon receiving the report. The police promptly launched an investigation. The missing person, Saki Kondo, a 27-year-old office worker, was employed in Maa City, Hyogo Prefecture. She had previously lived with her mother, older brother, and grandfather. Her father, who worked in metal processing, had been working in Thailand for an extended period. It was rare for him to have the opportunity to return home and reunite with the family almost every year. Saki's family planned a trip together to visit her father in Thailand. During these trips, Saki developed a strong desire to travel abroad, determined to pursue her passion. Saki worked hard to improve her English, hoping to visit more countries in the future. Over the years, she attended a prestigious all-girls private school in Hyogo Prefecture. With excellent academic performance, she joined the school's brass band club and lived life to the fullest each day. From a young age, Saki placed great importance on language learning, particularly English. She made significant efforts and achieved a high level of proficiency, allowing her to read English magazines and watch English videos without any difficulty after graduating from high school. She was accepted into a local university with her strong English skills. She often spent her holidays traveling to European countries for short trips, where she made several international friends. After graduating, Saki started working early and went through a few job changes. 2 years ago, she secured a position as a saleswoman at a parts manufacturing company in Emiya City. She then moved into the company's employee dormitory and began living independently. Saki was a warm and cheerful person. If she encountered a foreigner asking for directions while on the street, she was always kind enough to help. She often invited her foreign friends over to visit her home. At work, she was always willing and enthusiastic to assist her colleagues with any English-related issues they had. Saki was well-liked by both her colleagues and family members. She was kind, friendly, intelligent, sensitive, and responsible, so she would never intentionally lose touch with the important people in her life. She lived a relatively simple life and seemed to hold no grudges against anyone. Her sudden disappearance left her family, friends, and colleagues deeply perplexed. The police then investigated Saki's social connections and uncovered a crucial lead from a friend. It turned out that Saki had told a friend on February 15th, the day she went missing, "I'm going on a date with an American after work. His name is Jay. I just met him online." This clue immediately caught the attention of the police. They compiled all the surveillance videos from relevant locations and streets to track Saki's movements. After she left work, the footage revealed that a man suspected to be Jay was with her on February 15th, 2018. The day after Valentine's Day, Saki left work and headed straight to a nearby train station. She took a train for about an hour to Moriya Station in Osaka. Around midnight, surveillance footage near the station showed her walking with a man. The two seemed close, displaying affectionate gestures, and were heading south. They looked like a couple. The surveillance system eventually tracked Saki and the man entering a hotel not far from the train station. They stayed at a B&B. However, in the following days, the surveillance footage only showed the man repeatedly entering and leaving. But Saki was not seen again. The man in the footage had a tall, slender build and kept his face fully covered. Surveillance video showed him wearing black clothing, including black pants, a black short jacket, and black short boots. He also wore a black baseball cap, a white face mask, and a pair of dark sunglasses. Completely obscuring his face, it seemed like he was trying to hide something. Additionally, for reasons unknown, he was always seen carrying a large backpack when entering and leaving the premises, which looked quite suspicious. The B&B they stayed at was located in the Hijismoshi district of Osaka. It was an old 3-story building. The exterior, white walls, appeared to have not been cleaned for a long time, showing signs of yellowing. The walls had several low rectangular windows. The police managed to track down the owner of the B&B, hoping he still had a record of the guests who checked in at that time. However, unfortunately, it turned out to be a black market B&B while it was listed for rent on Airbnb, a popular home rental app. It didn't have a proper business license. This meant that guests could book a room through the app without providing their real identity. As a result, the police were unable to determine the identity of the suspicious man. The police then shifted their focus back to the surveillance footage to track down the suspect. At that time, road surveillance systems were quite advanced and had a high coverage rate in the cities. The suspect seemed to be focused only on disguising himself and hiding his identity without much awareness of counter-surveillance measures, so his movements were relatively easy to trace. Through the video footage, the police quickly pinpointed his location. A few days after Saki's disappearance, the suspect had left Osaka and moved to several other B&Bs and was currently in Nara City. On February 22, 2018, a week after the disappearance, police arrested the suspect at a B&B in the area. The suspect was identified as Yevi Vasvik Baikar, born in 1991, a 27-year-old American tourist. He went by the name Jay online. The same person who had gone on a date with Saki Jay was born in Odessa, Ukraine. His mother, Regina, was Ukrainian and his father was Bulgarian. A professional doctor when Jay was young, his parents divorced later. His mother met Benny. Daisy, an engineer from the United States, they connected through a social networking site, specifically one that linked North American men with Eastern European women. After getting to know each other, Mr. Daisy fell in love with his mother. He personally traveled to Ukraine to bring her and Jay back to live with him. After returning to Texas, the two got married and started a new family life together. This is how Jay, then 9 years old, became an American citizen. Jay's stepfather treated him like his own son and cared for him with all his love. However, Jay never fully opened up to him in his stepfather's eyes. Jay was very shy and always seemed to be just his mother's son. He had very few friends and didn't seem interested in expanding his social circle, only talking to his mother at home, no matter how much his stepfather cared. Jay chose to remain silent. On the other hand, it seemed that his mother had her own plans. After getting married and immigrating to the U.S., she began working towards obtaining a nursing degree. After several years of hard work and study, she achieved her dream and established herself in the United States. One day, she quietly took Jay and left Mr. Daisy. He searched tirelessly for them, but for a long time there was no news. This caused him great heartbreak. Then one day he unexpectedly received a letter from his wife Regina. Before he could feel any joy, he was left stunned. Regina had actually requested that he sign the divorce papers enclosed in the letter. It turned out that she had never truly loved him, but had only used him to become a legal U.S. citizen after leaving Texas. She and her son moved to Long Island, New York, where she found a job using her nursing certification. Not long after she met and fell in love with a local engineer, they eventually planned to get married. It was at this point that she realized she was still legally married to Mr. Daisy, whom she had long forgotten. So she wrote to him openly requesting that he sign the divorce papers. Upon reading the letter, Mr. Daisy finally understood everything. He realized he had merely been a means for her to immigrate to the United States. No longer wanting to hold on in vain, he was ready to sign the divorce papers afterward. Regina was free to marry her new love, as she had hoped. The two of them moved to a house in Mastic Beach and began the happy life they had long desired in 2007. Jay enrolled at William Floyd High School in the area and excelled during his 4 years there. After graduating in 2011, he voluntarily enlisted in the military and successfully passed the exams. He joined the U.S. Air Force as he had hoped. According to regulations, Jay was required to serve in the military for 4 years, but for reasons unknown, he was discharged after only 11 months and returned to his hometown in Long Island. In the time that followed, he led an idle life. Those who knew Jay were surprisingly unanimous in their assessment of him. They described him as quiet, shy, and reserved. He seemed to have a deep fascination with Japanese culture, always eager to visit Japan for vacations, and had traveled there more than 10 times. However, his purpose in going to Japan was not so simple. Beyond sightseeing, he also longed to find and love a gentle and virtuous Japanese woman. Anyone familiar with him knew that he had an unusual obsession with Japanese women. He had once confessed to a friend that he wanted to marry a Japanese wife. At the end of January 2018, Jay obtained a 90-day tourist visa and flew from the United States to Kai, Japan. He planned to stay there for an extended period to enjoy a fulfilling experience from this perspective. It's no surprise that Jay met Saki. However, when confronted with accusations regarding Saki's disappearance, Jay refused to admit anything, stating, "I don't know anything about her." With the surveillance evidence in hand, the police, of course, did not believe his denial. On the same day Jay was arrested, the police also obtained a search warrant from the court. A search was conducted at the B&B where the two had stayed, but the police did not find Saki inside, nor did they find any of her belongings or suspicious bloodstains in the worst-case scenario. So what method did Jay use to make a living? Breathing persons suddenly disappear into thin air right before everyone's eyes. A sudden, ominous feeling began to take hold. The police realized that the chances of Saki still being alive somewhere were incredibly slim. It was possible that she had been murdered over the next 2 days. The police carefully searched the B&B again and also checked other B&Bs where the suspect had stayed in recent days. Finally, they found a crucial clue at one of these locations. The suspicious B&B was located at Hanazono Wanam, Naru, Osaka, just a 6 to 7 minute walk from the nearest station. It was a 3-story apartment building with gray exterior walls surrounded by scaffolding. It appeared to be under renovation. Like the others, this was also a black market. B&B. The rooms were very simple, and the surrounding environment was not great. Staying here for a night cost only 230 yen, which is about $14 because of the low price. It was typically rented by night workers and laborers in the area. The owner of this B&B had a strong impression of Jay. He recounted a few days ago a handsome foreign guest with a suitcase stayed at my B&B for one night. Foreign tourists are rare here, so I paid special attention to him after observing the scene. Several police officers accompanied the B&B owner to the room where Jay had stayed. As soon as they entered, they noticed a strange odor, a mix of something foul and an overpowering fragrance. The closer they got to the room, the more unbearable the smell became. When they opened the door, they found a small 6-square-meter room. The cramped space was barely enough for one person to lie down. The odor in the room was so strong that everyone present felt deeply uncomfortable. It didn't take long for them to discover a suitcase left behind in the room. It seemed to have been sprayed with a deodorizer, possibly in an attempt to mask some foul smell, but it had clearly failed the investigators. Karai approached and opened the suitcase. They were stunned when they found a decaying human head inside the site at the scene. Left many of those present shocked and horrified. DNA comparisons confirmed that the head belonged to Saki, who had been missing for nearly 10 days. Faced with this new evidence, Jay knew he could no longer deny the truth. Desperate, the perpetrator confessed everything, recounting how he had met Saki. Yet even to the end, he repeatedly claimed, "I didn't mean to kill her." It turned out that while Jay was known to friends and family as a reserved and quiet person, he had a completely different persona online. though he had deleted all his related accounts after the incident. The truth was uncovered through the recovery of his data records. Jay frequently used Tinder, a dating app, with users. Worldwide, mainly young and middle-aged individuals, users can upload photos of themselves, add their interests and skills, and introduce themselves to others. If two users show mutual interest, they can connect once connected. They can start chatting online. The app also supports location services, allowing users to connect with others nearby. Jay seemed to lack confidence in his appearance. He didn't post any real photos of himself on his profile. Instead, he found a picture online and used a more appealing online name. He had visited Japan multiple times and used the location suggestion feature of social media apps to connect and chat with local women, including Saki. He had been involved with nearly 10 Japanese women, clearly unsatisfied with just chatting online. He tried every possible way to persuade them to go out and spend the night at a B&B to satisfy his desires. He was fascinated by a series of romantic encounters engaging in one-night stands. In January 2018, Jay obtained a 90-day tourist visa for Japan and began his pursuit of beauty. This time he chose the Kai region, specifically selecting various black market B&Bs along the train line and frequently changing location while meeting different Japanese women. On February 12, 2018, Jay checked into a B&B in Higashikata W of Osaka, planning to stay there for a week. During this time, he met Saki through a social app. Both Saki and Jay were the same age. Saki had a beautiful, delicate, gentle, and outgoing appearance, perfectly matching his ideal image of a Japanese woman. Saki also showed interest in the young foreign man. By chance, they successfully matched on the social app. Saki English was excellent and there were no communication barriers, so her enthusiasm quickly attracted Jay. After a while, they exchanged contact information and added each other as friends on Instagram. A few days after chatting, Jay wanted to invite Saki to Osaka. However, where Saki lived, was 50 kilometers away from Osaka, requiring more than an hour by train. She felt it was too soon to meet in person since they had just met. So she told him, "I'm busy with work and would like to get to know you better first." No matter how hard Jay tried to be persuasive or assertive, Saki still refused to meet. Fearing that his target might slip away, Jay felt the need to be more decisive. He pressured her by saying, "If you don't meet me, I'll come to your house." Hearing this, Saki found it difficult to refuse. He continued to push her. "I know where you work and where you live. If you don't agree to meet, I'll come to your house." After much consideration, Saki finally compromised. She promised Jay she would come to Osaka to meet him after work on Thursday, the day of their meeting. Quickly arrived that day after work, Saki took the train to Osaka's Morinomiya station. Jay was already waiting nearby when Saki saw Jay in person. She was a bit surprised because he looked completely different from his profile picture on the social app. However, Jay was friendly and considerate. After a few pleasant exchanges, Saki let her guard down and the two walked together toward the B&B, laughing and chatting closely. The next day was still a work day for Saki, so she planned to return to Emma early to be on time for work and had no intention of staying long, but she never imagined she would never get the chance to return. During the investigation, the police discovered that before Saki, there had been 4 to 5 other women who stayed at the same B&B with Jay. However, none of them were harmed. Saki was the only victim currently. Finding the rest of Saki's remains had become the top priority. After several days of interrogation, Jay finally admitted to dismembering and disposing of Saki's body. However, he remained tight-lipped about what had happened at the B&B that night on February 25, 2018. Based on Jay's confession, the police went to the mountains near Osaka and entered the forest. After searching, they found a spot where the ground had been disturbed. There, the police discovered Saki's arm, and her torso was found not far away. On the same day, Saki's legs were found in a bamboo grove in Kyoto. No one could have imagined that Saki, who was so kind and enthusiastic, would meet such a tragic end. Her family was devastated after learning the news about their daughter. The forensic report indicated that Saki died from suffocation, but to this day, Jay still refuses to confess the truth. He appears very fearful and repeatedly tells the police, I didn't mean to. The police speculate that the two may have had an argument at the B&B during which Saki was accidentally killed by Jay after realizing that Saki was no longer breathing. Jay became terrified. Once he calmed down, he started thinking of ways to cover up the incident. Quickly turning off Saki's phone to prevent her family and friends from contacting her, he then logged out of their social media accounts to hide their connection. Finally, he searched the internet for various methods to dispose of the body and carried out his plan. The next day, Jay went out with a large bag on his back and purchased a saw and a bottle of deodorizer. He extended his stay at the room for a few more days and quietly dismembered Saki's body in the rented room. During the night, he disposed of her body parts in the mountains of Osaka and Kyoto. As for the head, the most easily identifiable part, he placed it in a suitcase and hid it in another B&B to mask the odor. He sprayed a large amount of deodorizer in the room to prevent others from noticing. However, his efforts were ultimately futile. Strangely, Jay didn't seem to have any intention of fleeing Japan. When he was arrested, he was staying at a B&B in Nara. After the incident, he had ample time to escape and return to the U.S., but he didn't seem to have any such plans and continued his travels as planned after hearing the news of his daughter's murder. Saki's father, who was far away in Thailand, hurried back to Japan. For the next year, he closely followed the developments of the case. He hoped the court would handle the case and severely punish the murderer to bring justice for his daughter. A year after the incident in 2019, the case was tried at the Kobe District Court. Since it couldn't be proven that Jay had the intent to commit murder, he was ultimately convicted of 2 crimes, manslaughter and disposing of a body. Jay appeared gone in court. He continued to defend himself, insisting that he never intended to kill her, and pleaded for Saki's family to forgive him. He repeatedly apologized, saying, "I will carry the burden of this crime until the day I die." However, no one believed his words. Although his intent at the time of the crime couldn't be determined, his actions afterward showed no remorse. Instead of turning himself in, he tried to cover up the crime by deleting accounts, dismembering and burying the victim's body. These were all deliberate, selfish, and callous acts. Due to the clear evidence, the trial proceeded swiftly. On January 22, 2019. The Kobe District Court officially convicted Jay of manslaughter and other charges, sentencing him to 8 years in prison. This sentence sparked outrage among many people. Saki's family felt deeply disappointed, believing that the punishment was too lenient for the killer and that the truth had not been fully revealed. The trial ended hastily, with Jay remaining silent and uncooperative. They may never know why their daughter was killed. It's worth noting that in the past 2 years, this was the 8th illegal incident involving the use of B&Bs in Japan. The severity of this case brought attention to the issue of black market B&Bs among relevant authorities. Following the incident, Japan has made efforts to regulate the B&B industry today, privately managed. B&Bs are required to verify the true identity of their guests to prevent black market B&Bs from attracting tourists and becoming breeding grounds for crime. As of now, Jay has served 5 years of his sentence, and he will soon be released in 3 years. However, Saki, a young woman who once had a bright future and dreams of traveling the world, will never have the chance to fulfill those dreams. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me here at Mr. Night Scared True Crime Stories. Remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware, even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. If you've enjoyed tonight's tale, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.